Welcome to the first paradox. Let's start with a simple yet mind-bending question. How can saying say? This is a paradox that lives in silence, a trick that feels too empty to work, and yet it can flip a conversation upside down. Think about it. You ask someone a tough question. Why did you lie about that? Or, what are you not telling me? And then you stop. You just, no words, no rescue, no softening the blow, no filling the space, just silence, nothing, everything. The power pause. Look. And then something strange happens. That silence, it starts to speak loudly, not to you, but to them. Their mind begins spinning. Why isn't he saying anything? What is she thinking right now? Do I need to explain more? And the brain hates that uncertainty. It panics. The silence stretches, becomes awkward, uncomfortable, unbearable. And suddenly, they talk, they explain, they confess, they overshare. You didn't even move. You didn't raise your voice. You just paused. That's the paradox. You controlled everything by doing nothing. It doesn't make sense. We're taught to be assertive, to push our point, to fill the silence with logic and argument and fire. But this is the opposite. It's restraint. And restraint doesn't feel powerful until you use it. Here's why this paradox works so deeply. Silence doesn't mean nothing. It means waiting. And waiting makes people wonder. People fill in blanks. They add meaning. They assume judgment, disapproval, curiosity, threat. All you did was pause, and they experienced a storm. Now here's the real twist. The less you say, the more they hear. That's the inversion. We believe that to be heard, we must speak more. But in truth, the human brain hates ambiguity. It craves resolution. So if you give someone a sharp question and follow it with silence, their mind won't rest until the silence is resolved. That's when the truth slips out. It's like holding up a mirror, not a physical one, but a mental one. The pause reflects their thoughts right back at them. And in that reflection, the truth gets louder. They start answering questions you didn't even ask. Their mind says, I need to break this silence. I need to explain myself. I need to protect myself. And that's when they open the door. The power pause is not a trick. It's a pressure point. It's the space after the strike that matters. The question stings. The pause amplifies it. Just like a drum beat, you don't just hear the hit, you hear the echo. Now let's go deeper. Why does this silence hold power? Because in social settings, silence is rare. We're addicted to noise. We fill every gap with something. Words, jokes, explanations, defenses. So when someone dares to go quiet, the rules change. It signals control, confidence, calm. And nothing is more intimidating than someone who is completely calm in a moment of tension. It's like playing poker. The guy who never blinks, never fidgets, just stares at you silently after a bold move. That's the guy you start fearing, because you don't know what he's thinking. That's what the power pause does. It creates mystery, and mystery always leads to movement. You don't even have to force anything. They'll do it to themselves. But here's the wild part. People often think that speaking gives them control, but the real control lies in what you withhold. Silence becomes leverage. The pause becomes a test. Will they stay calm? Will they rush to defend? Will they spill something they didn't mean to say? You find out the truth not by pressing harder, but by pulling back. It's like fishing. You don't yank the line immediately. You wait. You feel. You let the tension build. The pause is that tension, and tension always seeks release. That release, their words. Still, don't get this wrong. Silence isn't passive. It's active. It's intentional. It's surgical. You don't go quiet because you have nothing to say. You go quiet because they have something to say, and you're giving them space to reveal it. This is why the power pause is so paradoxical. It's loud in its quietness. It's aggressive in its stillness. It's dominant in its subtlety. The world teaches you to respond fast, speak often, and take control by force. The power pause flips that entirely. You take control by holding back. You weaponize the stillness, and the silence becomes a force they can't ignore. It's also disarming. When someone expects a fight and gets stillness, their guard drops, their rhythm breaks, and in that break, truth slips out. People are less filtered when they're trying to fix a moment that feels wrong, and an awkward silence feels very wrong. So they scramble, and in the scramble, they expose. Now imagine using this in your everyday life. In a negotiation, pause after they give you a number. Just look at them. Wait, don't flinch. In a relationship, pause after you ask, "Is that really how you feel?" In an argument, pause after you say, "That's not what I heard." You're not trying to win with volume. You're letting them fill in the gaps, and they will. Because silence hurts. It itches, it stretches, and in that stretched moment, the mask slips. You're not being manipulative. You're being strategic. You're making space for the truth to surface. You're letting discomfort do the work, and that's the heart of the paradox. In a world that runs from awkward silence, you walk straight into it and let them run from it instead. So next time you want the truth, don't chase it. Just create the gap, ask your question, make your bold statement, and then say nothing. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how getting someone to help you makes them like you more. It doesn't make sense at first. We assume that if we want people to like us, we should help them. We should give, support, offer, assist. That's what friendship is, right? But this flips the idea on its head. It says, don't give, ask, don't serve, receive. Because when someone does something small for you, something strange happens in their mind. They start liking you more, not because of what you gave them, but because of what they gave you. That's the Benjamin Franklin effect, and it's a complete reversal of logic. Franklin himself noticed it first. He had a rival in politics, someone who didn't like him. So instead of trying to win him over with kindness or favors, Franklin did something bold. He asked the man if he could borrow a rare book. Just a small ask. The man agreed. Franklin thanked him and returned it later. But after that moment, their relationship changed. The man warmed up to him. He even became a friend. Not because Franklin gave something, but because he asked for something. The paradox lives here. Doing a favor makes us like the receiver. Our brain doesn't enjoy contradictions. So if we help someone and we didn't have to, our mind tries to make sense of it. Why did I do that? I must like this person. Otherwise, why would I help them? The help justifies the feeling, even if the feeling wasn't there before. We don't help people because we like them. We like people because we help them. That's the reversal, and the mind does this quietly. You ask for a small favor, a pencil, a bit of advice, a simple opinion. They say yes, and that yes begins to pull on something deeper. They begin to tell themselves a story. I helped them, so I must value them. They must be worth my time. And just like that, rapport is born, not from giving, but from receiving. It's not manipulation. It's human wiring. The mind wants to stay consistent. So once we act kindly, we adjust our beliefs to match our behavior. If I helped you, then I must feel something positive toward you. Otherwise, my action wouldn't make sense. That's what makes this paradox powerful. It's not based on charm, wealth, or clever words. It's based on the small, simple act of asking. And when you ask, you create space for the other person to step into that story. But notice, it only works if the favor is small. If you ask for too much, it feels like a transaction. It flips the script back to logic. I did this because I had to. But a small favor? That flies under the radar. It sneaks past defenses. It feels unimportant until it isn't. Because now, they've invested something. A moment, a choice, a bit of themselves. And once someone invests in you, they subconsciously want a return, but not a return from you, a return from within. That return is emotional. It's identity-based. I am someone who helps good people, so if I helped you, you must be a good person. See the twist? You're not proving your worth to them. They're deciding your worth because they helped you. That's why the Benjamin Franklin effect is so paradoxical. You gain more by taking a little than by giving a lot. And that's hard for people to accept. We want to impress. We want to be generous. We want to earn affection. But this effect says, pause. Stop trying to give. Try asking. Just enough to let someone feel like they've done something meaningful for you. And the more they do, the more they justify liking you. It's a cycle, a self-reinforcing loop. They help, they help again, they like more. And none of it feels forced because their own actions convince them. This turns the usual social playbook upside down. Think of how most people try to build connection. They offer, they serve, they try to win affection through sacrifice. But that can feel imbalanced. It can even make the other person feel guilty or resistant, because being helped often creates a sense of debt. But when they help you, the feeling flips. Now they feel agency. They made a choice. They see you as someone worth choosing. And that feeling grows, not because of what you did, but because of what you allowed them to do. This is why great leaders and connectors use this without even realizing it. They ask for opinions. They ask for insights. They ask for tiny bits of help. And in doing that, they pull people in. Not through dominance, through participation. It also builds trust in reverse. Normally, we think we have to earn trust by proving ourselves. But when you trust someone enough to ask them for help, they start to feel trusted. And if they feel trusted, they begin to feel trusting. Another inversion. The Benjamin Franklin effect is full of these reversals. Give to receive? No. Receive to build. Help to be liked? No. Ask to be helped, and the liking follows. Connection doesn't start with your gift. It starts with their contribution. And their contribution changes how they see you. So how do you use this? Gently. Naturally. Ask for something that costs little, but matters just enough. Can I get your take on this? Do you have a moment to explain this part? Mind helping me choose between these two options? These don't sound like strategies. They sound like what they are, invitations. And when people accept those invitations, they're also accepting you. And here's where the paradox deepens. You might think asking for help makes you seem weak, but it actually makes you more human, more open, more relatable. It invites connection through vulnerability, not the big emotional kind, but the everyday kind, the kind people respond to without even noticing. And once they respond, their feelings follow. So next time you want someone to like you, try this. Don't flatter, don't overgive, don't perform, just ask, just enough. Then step back. Let their mind do the rest. Let them write their story about why they helped you. And in writing that story, they'll write you into their good graces. You'll have done almost nothing, and yet you'll gain everything. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how copying someone can make them trust you more. It sounds strange. We're told to be original, to stand out, to be ourselves. But this flips the idea upside down. It says, if you want someone to feel close to you, if you want connection without effort, don't stand out, blend in, don't lead, mirror. The paradox is simple. The more you act like them, the more they feel you are like them. Not because you said the right thing, not because you shared deep ideas, but because, without them noticing, you moved like them. You shifted when they shifted. You leaned when they leaned. You scratched your face a second after they did. You nodded slowly when they paused, and all of it happened under the surface. The power of mirroring lies in its invisibility. If they notice it, it breaks. If they don't, it bonds. Because the brain is always scanning for patterns, for safety, for familiarity. And nothing feels safer than seeing yourself reflected in another human. You don't even need to know someone to make them feel connected. You just move like they do, sit how they sit, gesture with similar energy, and something inside them whispers, "This person gets me." Even if you've barely said a word. It's not about flattery, it's about rhythm. Every person has their own social rhythm, how fast they speak, how big their movements are, how they use their hands, how they breathe. Mirroring is matching that rhythm like a silent dance. When you match someone's rhythm, their brain sees you as in sync. And when people feel in sync, they feel safe. Here's the twist. We think connection comes from words, but often the connection happens before words even begin. It happens in the first few seconds, when your posture lines up with theirs, when your smile lands at the same time, when your body speaks the same language, and all of it happens silently. This is why mirroring works, because people don't listen to what you say until they feel you're like them. And the fastest way to feel alike is to look alike, just for a moment. Just enough for the brain to say, "Yes, you're part of my tribe." Now here's the paradox in full. You gain influence not by leading first, but by following quietly. You don't push your style, you adopt theirs, and in doing so, they become open to you. Their guard drops, their brain calms, their trust grows, because deep down, people trust what feels familiar, and what's more familiar than their own movements. Mirroring feels like surrender. You're not showing off, you're not controlling, you're simply matching. But that surrender becomes your power. Because once they feel safe, then you can lead. Then you can guide the flow, but only after you've matched their rhythm. It's like music. Two instruments can't harmonize unless they're tuned to the same key. Mirroring is that tuning. It says, "I see you. I move with you. I'm not a threat." And that message unlocks the door to trust. This trust happens even if they don't consciously notice what you're doing. That's the beauty. The moment they feel seen, not by your eyes but by your body, they begin to soften. They lean in more. They talk more. They open. You didn't impress them. You didn't outsmart them. You simply mirrored them. And that was enough. But don't mistake this for imitation. Imitation is obvious, awkward, and fake. Mirroring is subtle. A few seconds delay, a half beat behind, just enough to say, "I'm here with you," without copying like a puppet. That delay is key. Too fast and it looks strange. Too exact and it feels staged. But a small reflection, a posture shift, a slight tilt, a similar tone, creates that invisible bridge. And that bridge holds the entire conversation. This paradox teaches something deeper. Humans crave connection, not perfection. We don't trust the person who looks flawless. We trust the one who reflects us. And that reflection doesn't need to be verbal. It can be physical, emotional, energetic. Mirroring taps into this without force. It's not a trick. It's an alignment. You're not trying to win. You're trying to resonate. And once resonance is there, the real conversation begins. This is why skilled communicators mirror naturally. They don't fake it. They feel it. They tune into the other person's state, and their body adjusts without thinking. Because real mirroring isn't mechanical, it's emotional. You feel someone's vibe, and your body follows. But even if you start intentionally, that's okay. With practice, mirroring becomes instinct. You start to feel people more than analyze them, and that feeling shapes your movements, your pace, your tone, all without saying, "I'm like you." Your body says it for you. The paradox grows deeper. The more you disappear into someone's rhythm, the more they see you. You become visible by being invisible. You become trusted by not trying too hard. Because effort creates distance. Subtlety creates closeness. It's soft power. And soft power always lasts longer. So try it. Next time you meet someone new, don't force charm. Just listen, watch, sit like they sit, mirror their pace, nod when they nod, gesture in rhythm, speak with their energy, not to copy, but to reflect. And then watch the wall fall. Watch the warmth rise. Watch the words flow. All because you made them feel seen, without telling them a single thing. That's the paradox of mirroring. You lead by following. You connect by reflecting. You become memorable not by being loud, but by being in tune. And once you're in tune, everything else becomes easy. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how naming a feeling can shrink it. It sounds backwards. When someone's upset, you'd think talking about their emotions would make it worse. You'd think naming anger would feed it, calling out sadness would deepen it, pointing to stress would strengthen it. But no, it does the opposite. When you put words to an emotion, it starts to lose its grip. The storm quiets, the temperature drops, and the person begins to breathe again. This is called affect labeling. And the paradox is this: when someone's drowning in feeling, you don't solve it by avoiding the feeling. You solve it by naming it. You say, "You seem frustrated. You sound overwhelmed. You look like this is really bothering you." And in that tiny sentence, something powerful happens. They feel seen, not judged, not fixed, just noticed. And being noticed in the middle of chaos, that's the lifeline. The mind is loud when it's emotional. Feelings come in waves, unorganized, chaotic, raw. But when you take all that chaos and give it a name, you put structure around it. You build a small box around a big mess. And the moment that box appears, the mess feels less scary. That's the paradox. When you name the monster, it stops being a monster. We're taught to comfort people with solutions, with logic, with calm down or don't worry or look on the bright side. But those don't calm anyone. In fact, they often make it worse because the person doesn't feel understood. They feel dismissed. They're told to stop feeling what they're clearly feeling. But when you label their emotion, even softly, it says the opposite. I see what's happening inside you. I'm not running from it. I'm right here with it. And that simple act reduces the intensity of what they're feeling. It's not magic. It's how the brain works. When emotion floods the brain, especially fear, anger, or sadness, it hijacks our ability to think clearly. But when someone gives us language, when they name what we're feeling, it activates a different part of the brain. The thinking part, the part that organizes, reasons, reflects. And that small switch changes everything. You don't need to solve their problem. You just need to help them see it more clearly. Naming brings clarity, and clarity brings calm. You say, "Sounds like this really hurt you," or "You seem disappointed," or even, "I can tell this isn't sitting right with you." That's it. No lectures, no advice, just a label. And that label becomes a handle. Now they're not drowning. They're holding on to something. And with that grip, they start to breathe. They start to speak. They start to let go. It's strange how little effort it takes. Just a short sentence, just one emotion. And yet, the impact is deep. But here's the deeper paradox. You take the power out of emotion by respecting it. You don't fight the feeling. You don't deny it. You honor it. And honoring it gives it less control, because most emotional reactions come not just from the feeling itself, but from the fear of being alone in it. If someone's angry, they don't want a lecture. They want to know that someone sees their anger. And when you say, "You seem really upset," you're not escalating it. You're grounding it. The feeling starts to settle because now it has somewhere to go. This works even if you're wrong. If you say, "You seem anxious," and they reply, "No, I'm more annoyed," that's still progress. They're clarifying. They're naming it for themselves. And that's the goal. Once a feeling is named, it loses its fog. It becomes real, but manageable. Think of it like this. Emotions are like smoke. They cloud everything, make it hard to see, hard to breathe. But when you point and say, "There's the smoke," it suddenly becomes easier to find the fire. You still might be in danger, but now you know where to look. And that's all people want when they're emotional. Direction recognition, a signal that someone gets it. This is why people calm down when therapists say, "You sound sad," or when a friend quietly says, "You don't seem like yourself today." It's not about fixing. It's about witnessing, and being witnessed gives the emotion less control. Now flip the roles. When you're the one feeling something strong and someone says, "That sounds exhausting," or "You look like you're carrying a lot," it instantly shifts something. You feel lighter, not because the problem is gone, but because you're no longer invisible. The paradox deepens. People don't need you to remove their pain. They need you to recognize it. And when you do that, you reduce it without touching it. You lower the weight without lifting it. You ease the chaos without solving a thing, because naming emotion is emotional CPR. It helps someone breathe again, not through effort, but through presence, not through wisdom, but through words, and not many, just enough, just a single line to let them know you see them in their storm. And somehow that seeing becomes shelter. It feels unnatural at first. We want to jump in, offer fixes, push positivity, but the deeper power is in restraint, in staying with the feeling and not pushing it away, in saying, "You seem hurt," and stopping right there. That's where the connection begins, not with solutions, but with stillness, not with answers, but with acknowledgement. And that's what makes this so paradoxical. You calm someone down, not by changing how they feel, but by validating what they feel. You don't reduce the emotion by resisting it. You reduce it by naming it. So next time someone's upset, don't fill the air, don't explain, don't fix. Just pause, look at them, and give the feeling a name, even a guess. That guess becomes a bridge. And on the other side of that bridge is calm, clarity, and trust. That's the strange magic of affect labeling. The name shrinks the pain, and the smallest word can hold the heaviest feeling. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how starting too big can help you get exactly what you want. It sounds like a bad strategy. Ask for something ridiculous, something they'll definitely say no to. Isn't that just setting yourself up for rejection? But here's where the paradox kicks in. That no you get from the first. Bigger request actually opens the door to a yes on the second, smaller one. You didn't fail. You just softened the ground. This is called the door in the face technique. You knock, they slam the door, and then when you knock again with something more reasonable, they open it. Because now, compared to the first thing, the second one doesn't feel like a big deal. The contrast changes everything. Let's say you ask someone to donate $500 to your project. That's a hard no, but then you say, "Okay, how about just $20? Suddenly, $20 feels small, not because $20 changed, but because you changed what it was standing next to. This is the trick of perspective. Nothing really shifts except the frame. The second request is the one you actually wanted all along. But by leading with something bigger, you make that second ask feel lighter, easier, more acceptable. The paradox is that failure, planned failure, becomes the path to success. You win by losing first. And it works because people want to feel fair. When they say no to something big, there's a little guilt, a little tension. They don't want to seem unhelpful. So when you follow up with something smaller, they get a chance to say yes without feeling taken advantage of. It feels like compromise. It feels like cooperation. It feels better. But it only works when it feels real. If your big ask feels fake or manipulative, the whole thing collapses. The first no has to be believable. You have to ask for something just out of reach, not completely absurd. It has to look like you really wanted that first thing and then adjusted when it didn't land. That adjustment is what creates the effect. It looks like you're compromising, but really, you're guiding. Here's where the paradox deepens. People are more likely to say yes to what they already wanted to say no to, as long as it follows something bigger. So it's not about changing their mind directly. It's about changing their frame of reference. What felt like too much before now feels easy. The pressure drops, the ask becomes digestible, and it all starts with rejection. You walk into a no on purpose, you plant it, let it happen, and then you make your real move. That's the strategy that feels like sabotage, but ends up as success. This runs against every instinct. We're told to be reasonable, polite, strategic. But this is strategic irrationality. You deliberately overreach, not to take more, but to make the real thing seem lighter. You build tension on purpose so the release feels good. It's like lifting a heavy weight and then picking up something light right after. The light thing feels weightless, not because it is, but because of what came before. The same thing happens in the mind. Now, some will say, isn't this manipulation? And here's the twist. It doesn't work if it feels manipulative. It has to feel like a real conversation, a real change of heart. That's why it works best when your first request still has a layer of believability. It has to feel human, honest, negotiable. You say, would you be open to helping me organize the whole event? They hesitate, say no. Then you say, no problem, maybe just help me with the guest list instead? That second ask now feels cooperative, friendly. They're no longer rejecting. You've given them an easy win. They get to help without doing too much. You get what you needed, and everyone walks away feeling good. That's the secret of the door-in-the-face technique. It doesn't pressure people, it releases pressure. It gives them an out and then a choice, and that choice feels more open than it would have if you just asked for it directly. That's why asking for less after asking for more feels better than asking for less first. The smaller thing suddenly becomes a relief. The brain loves contrast, and contrast creates context. The second request is measured against the first, not against itself. If you'd only asked for the small thing first, it might have felt like a big deal, but compared to the big ask, it now feels light, simple, reasonable. This strategy is used everywhere: sales, politics, relationships, negotiations. Ask for everything, then settle for something. And that something is often more than you would have gotten if you'd asked for it first, because it doesn't feel like a favor, it feels like a deal. And that's the paradox again. By risking a clear no, you create space for a more likely yes. Most people fear no, they run from it, they try to avoid rejection, but the door-in-the-face method walks straight into it, not to lose, but to shift the stage. It's controlled rejection. And controlled rejection is a setup for agreement. You become persuasive not by being perfect, but by showing you're flexible. You change your ask. You adapt. And that adaptation makes people more open to helping you. It's not about force, it's about flow. You move from high pressure to low pressure, from big to small, from stretch to comfort, and that movement is what people respond to. The mind says, okay, I said no once, but this second thing, that's fair. You're not taking more. You're actually asking for less. But that less now feels right. And that's what matters. So the next time you want something, don't ask for it directly. Ask for a little more than you need. Expect the number. Let it land. Then smile and say, all right, how about just this instead? They'll pause, think, and more often than not, they'll say yes, because that second ask doesn't feel like a burden. It feels like a break, And all you did was walk through the front door, let it close in your face, and knock again with something easier. That's the paradox. Rejection becomes the key that opens the door. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how leaving things unfinished makes people hold on tighter. It sounds wrong. We think people want full answers, clean endings, complete stories. But no, the opposite is true. If you want to keep someone hooked, don't give them the whole thing. Stop mid-story. Pause before the punchline. Hold back the last piece. Because their brain, once it starts something, needs to finish it. It craves the ending, and that craving keeps them engaged. This is the Zeigarnik effect. A simple idea with strange power. It says, incomplete thoughts stick longer than finished ones. The mind holds on to the open loop like a song that never resolves. Until it hears the last note, it can't let go. So if you're talking to someone and you say, something happened to me yesterday that changed how I see everything, but I'll tell you in a sec, you've already got them. Their attention locks in, not because of what you said, but because of what you didn't say. You gave them tension, and tension makes people stay. Here's the paradox. Silence is sticky. Gaps grab more attention than explanations. When you leave a task open, the brain keeps cycling it in the background. What happened next? Why did that matter? Where was this going? It becomes mental noise, and the only way to quiet it is to hear the rest. That's why cliffhangers work. That's why people binge shows. That's why we remember the story someone didn't finish more than the one they did. The mind can't help it. It wants resolution. Now imagine this in real conversation. You're sharing something, and you pause right before the answer. You say, there was this one moment in the meeting that completely shifted everything. But anyway, how's your week been? You've planted a hook, and now they're waiting. Not just out of curiosity, but out of psychological tension. Because you broke the pattern, most people rush to finish, but when you hold back, it creates a mental itch. That itch doesn't go away on its own. It needs scratching, and scratching means staying present. The mind is a problem solver, and an unfinished thought feels like a problem, an unsolved puzzle, a question mark hanging in the air. Even if the story isn't life-changing, the lack of closure gives it weight. That's what makes this effect so paradoxical. You don't capture attention by giving more. You capture it by giving less. You don't feed their mind. You frustrate it just enough to make it chase you. And it doesn't stop at stories. Tasks, too. If someone starts something and doesn't finish, it lingers in their mind. A half-written message, a conversation that ended too soon, a promise to explain something later. These things stay alive in the background until they're closed, and the brain will keep checking back again and again until it gets what it wants. But here's the key. It only works when you've started something real. There has to be just enough substance to pull the mind in. If you hold back too early, there's no tension. If you finish too quickly, there's no suspense. The trick is in the middle, that perfect spot where you've given enough to spark curiosity, but not enough to satisfy it. Think of it like a movie trailer. You don't show the whole plot. You show the setup, the spark, the stakes, and then you cut. The mind fills in the blanks. It stays curious. It leans forward. And that leaning forward, that's engagement. Now take this into persuasion, into teaching, into influence. You say, there's one thing almost nobody knows about how this works, but let's circle back to that. Just like that, you've created pull. Not by demanding attention, but by withholding closure. That's the heart of the Zeigarnik effect. Incompletion creates obsession, not consciously, subconsciously. You don't choose to keep thinking about the thing you didn't finish. It just loops. It nags. It hums quietly in the back of your mind until you find the resolution. And this is why people get stuck in thought spirals. replaying what they almost understood. This is why one unfinished sentence can be more memorable than an entire speech. This is why one pause before the answer makes the answer more powerful. It's the absence that makes the present stronger. But like every paradox, it only works if it's subtle. If you try too hard, it feels manipulative. If you withhold everything, it becomes annoying. You don't slam the door, you leave it cracked open. Just enough light to see what's inside, but not enough to see it all. And here's the twist. Once you finally give the answer, the story, the punchline, it hits harder. Because the brain has been waiting. Anticipation magnifies impact. So the ending feels more important, more satisfying, more true, even if it wasn't. That's the illusion. We think the ending was strong, but it's the waiting that made it feel that way. The tension inflated the value, and the mind rewards itself by saying, that was worth it. So the delay becomes the amplifier. The pause becomes the reason the moment lands. You say less, they remember more. You pause, they lean in. You stop the story halfway. They follow you to the end. It's all about loops. Start them. Don't rush to close them. Let the tension build. Let the curiosity pull them forward. And when they finally get what they were waiting for, they'll remember it, not because of what it was, but because of what it resolved. That's the paradox. The unfinished moment becomes unforgettable. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how something so small, so ordinary, can suddenly make you unforgettable. It's just a name, just a word, but when you use it, when you speak it out loud to someone, they feel something shift. Their eyes sharpen, their attention locks in, their chest lifts, even slightly. It's not about the sound, it's about the meaning, because their name is the one word in the universe that always belongs to them. And when you use it, you touch something personal. This is the paradox of name power. The more often you say someone's name, the more they feel seen, not because you're giving them anything, but because you're calling them home. Names do something logic can't. They create recognition without explanation. You could say 1,000 smart things, and they might forget everyone. But if you say their name twice in a conversation, they'll remember you, not because you were brilliant, but because you noticed them. And here's the strange twist. People don't even realize it's happening. They don't say, oh, this person used my name 3 times, so now I like them. Number it works silently, under the surface. Their brain just reacts. It hears the name and wakes up. It says, this is about me. I'm important here. Even science has shown it. Hearing your own name activates parts of the brain linked to identity, emotion, and attention. Not generic attention, selective attention. It cuts through noise, it clears distractions, it tells the mind, focus now. That's why the paradox is so powerful. The thing that feels most ordinary, your name, is the thing that makes the biggest emotional impact when someone else says it, especially when they say it with warmth, with care, with intention. And the best part? You're not giving them anything new. You're giving them what they already have. But now, they're hearing it from you. And that makes it echo louder. It sounds like magic, but it's just precision. Think of how people react when you say, thanks, Alex, instead of just thanks. It's a one-word difference, but it turns a generic comment into a personal one. The name pins it down. It makes the moment real. Now, do it again. I agree with you, Sarah. You made a great point, James. I appreciate that insight, Maya. Each time, the name brings weight. The same words, only now they feel aimed, intentional, human. That's why leaders, salespeople, negotiators, and teachers use it constantly, not because it's a trick, but because it grounds the connection. It says, I know who you are. I'm not just talking to a face. I'm talking to you. And that's what people crave, not just to be heard, but to be recognized. Now here's where the paradox deepens. We think power comes from what we say, from the big words, the clever lines, the knowledge we drop. But in truth, power comes from making others feel something, and hearing their name does that instantly. You don't even need a reason, you just weave it in, gently, smoothly, not forced, not mechanical, not every sentence, but enough to create rhythm, enough to remind them they matter here. That's the invisible gift of name power. It makes the other person feel central to the moment. And when someone feels central, they lean in, they open up, they remember. And they don't remember what you said. They remember how you made them feel. This is where the paradox takes full form. The more you say their name, the more they feel like the moment belongs to them. And yet, you're the one gaining their trust, their warmth, their attention. You lift them, and they lift you back. It's reciprocity without effort. You didn't compliment them. You didn't flatter them. You didn't do anything loud. You just said their name. But that alone flipped a switch in their brain that said, "This person respects me." Even in disagreement, it works. "I get where you're coming from, David." That sounds different than, "I get where you're coming from." The name softens the tone. It makes disagreement feel respectful, human, engaged. And that's the power in it. It doesn't change what you say. It changes how it lands. It doesn't change your words. It changes the relationship. You become someone who listens, someone who sees, someone who cares, all without claiming it, all just by speaking the one word that already belongs to them. And here's the final paradox. Their name isn't yours to use, but when you use it kindly, it brings you closer. You're borrowing something personal and offering back something more. So don't underestimate it. Don't toss it out like filler. Use it like a key that unlocks comfort, attention, and trust. Say it once at the beginning. Say it again in the middle. Say it one last time before you leave. They won't count the number of times, but they'll feel it in their chest. They'll remember how they felt talking to you, and long after the words fade, their name will echo back to them, with your voice behind it. That's how something so small holds so much weight. That's how saying their name gives you the room to be heard. And that's the paradox. The best way to stand out is to say their name, not yours. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how you are the star of the show, but only in your own mind. It sounds like a contradiction, but it's true. People often feel like every eye is on them, every thought is about them, and every misstep is being scrutinized. They think the world is watching and judging, but the paradox is this: the world is actually paying far less attention to them than they think. In fact, people are usually so wrapped up in their own concerns, their own flaws, and their own insecurities that they barely notice what anyone else is doing. This is called the spotlight effect. It's a strange twist. You feel like you're on stage, all the lights are on you, and every small mistake you make is magnified. But the reality is, people aren't staring at you nearly as much as you assume. They're too busy with their own stuff. The way you think everyone saw your embarrassing slip, they probably didn't even notice. So, here's the paradox. You're the center of your world, but not as much as you think. This is powerful knowledge, especially when someone feels embarrassed or self-conscious. They think the room is watching them stumble, watching them speak out of turn, or noticing how they fumbled their words. But the truth is, they're probably the only one who cares about it that much. The attention they imagine they're getting is usually an illusion. Here's why this is so paradoxical. When someone is embarrassed, they feel like their mistake is all-consuming, like it's the most important thing in the room. But in reality, no one is focusing on it nearly as much as they think. The spotlight effect makes people think they are the star of a show, and every mistake is being replayed over and over. But, in truth, the spotlight is dimmer than they feel. Think about it. You've probably had moments where you were embarrassed about something trivial. Maybe you tripped, or mispronounced something, or said the wrong thing. You think everyone saw it, everyone is laughing, everyone is judging. But later, when you talk to others, they barely remember, or maybe they never even noticed. Their minds were occupied with their own concerns, just like yours was with yours. So the paradox is simple. You're the star in your own head, but to everyone else, you're just another person going through life, just like they are. This effect works in both directions. When you're embarrassed, you feel like you've messed up in front of everyone, but it's important to understand that people's attention spans are limited. They're too distracted by their own experiences, their own emotions, and their own lives to remember yours in the detail you fear. Your misstep might feel like a disaster to you, but to them, it was just a passing moment, barely worth a second thought. If you're trying to reassure someone who is embarrassed, this paradox works wonders. Tell them, nobody noticed as much as you think. You're not the only one in this room with worries, and you're not under the spotlight like you feel you are. That knowledge takes the weight off. It removes the burden of imagined attention. It allows them to breathe easier. The more they understand that the attention they fear doesn't exist in the way they think, the more they can relax. But here's the deeper paradox. This feeling of being watched is an illusion. The spotlight isn't on you, it's on them. And the more you become aware of that, the easier it is to shake off your own self-consciousness. When you realize how little others are focused on you, the less power your mistakes have. This doesn't mean you shouldn't care about how you come across. It doesn't mean you should throw caution to the wind and act without consideration. It simply means you should recognize that the attention you fear is often far less intense, far less important, and far less permanent than you imagine. People move on quickly from your awkward moment because they're dealing with their own awkward moments. Their minds are busy. And so, the fear of being endlessly judged is mostly a construct. The paradox also holds a lesson in confidence. The more you understand that people aren't paying as much attention as you think, the more free you are to simply act. If the spotlight isn't shining as bright on you as you believe, then why hesitate? Why stress over every little mistake? You're walking through a crowd of people, all dealing with their own thoughts, their own lives, their own embarrassments. Theirs are just as messy as yours, and that's comforting. It's human. So, next time you feel embarrassed, remind yourself of this paradox. You are, in fact, not the center of everyone's attention. You don't have to hold yourself to an impossible standard. Your mistakes are just a part of life, and they'll fade from the spotlight much quicker than you think. It's the same with others. When you see someone else tripping up, saying the wrong thing, or acting awkwardly, don't assume they're under some heavy, glaring light. In fact, they probably feel just like you did when you were caught in that moment. They might feel like the whole world is watching, but in truth, the world is focused elsewhere. And here's the final paradox. The more you realize how little attention people actually pay to you, the more confident and free you become. Because you're no longer acting in response to some imagined audience. You can act, speak, and move without the constant fear of being watched, because you finally see that the spotlight, in reality, isn't shining that brightly on you at all. So, the next time you're feeling embarrassed, remember the spotlight effect. Relax. Nobody noticed as much as you think. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how a lie, said enough times, can start to feel like the truth. It shouldn't work. We like to think we believe what's true and reject what's false. We trust reason, facts, evidence. But here's the twist. The brain doesn't always care if something is true. It cares if something is familiar, if you've heard it before, if it sounds like something you've already accepted. And the more often you hear it, the more likely you are to believe it, even if it's completely false. That's the illusory truth effect. The paradox is simple. Repetition becomes reality. not because the statement gets smarter or more logical, but because your brain gets comfortable with it. You hear it once, and it's just a sentence. You hear it 10 times, and it starts to feel familiar. And once it feels familiar, your brain lowers its guard. It starts nodding along. It thinks, well, I keep hearing this. Maybe it's true. And that's the trap. This is why the same phrases, when repeated enough, become beliefs. You can't trust anyone. Success is all about luck. You're not good enough. If those phrases are said to you over and over by others or by your own inner voice, they start to feel real. Not because you chose them, but because they echoed. This is where the paradox gets deeper. The truth doesn't always win. The loudest thing, the most repeated thing, often does. We don't just believe what's right, we believe what we've heard the most. Our brains confuse frequency with fact. It works with good ideas too. Say something positive often enough. You're strong, you're capable, you're meant for more. And even if you don't believe it at first, eventually it starts to land. Repetition builds belief. Belief becomes identity, and identity shapes everything. But that's what makes it dangerous, because it works in both directions. Truth or lie, helpful or harmful, the brain plays the same game. If you hear it again and again, you start to accept it, not because it deserves to be accepted, but because your mind loves shortcuts. And the biggest shortcut of all? Familiarity. If something feels familiar, your brain treats it as safer, easier, more trustworthy, and that trust builds fast when you hear the same idea over and over. You don't notice the shift. It happens slowly, quietly, behind your thoughts, until one day you're not even questioning it anymore. It just feels right. That's the illusion. It's not truth you're believing. It's comfort. This is why people fall for slogans, why false rumors spread like wildfire, why myths survive for centuries. Because once a message is repeated enough, it gets sticky. It doesn't matter how wrong it is. It matters how often it shows up. The more times it appears, the more your brain says, yep, I've seen this before. Must be something to it. And now the paradox gets sharp. You can make people believe almost anything, not by proving it, but by repeating it. That sounds like manipulation, but it's also how we learn. It's how affirmations work. It's how mantras stick. It's how ideas turn into personal truths. The trick is knowing which voices are filling your mind, which statements are repeating, because those are the ones writing your beliefs. And not just your beliefs about the world, your beliefs about yourself. Think about what you say to yourself every day, the quiet comments, the background voice. If you say, I'm not good at this, every time you fail, you're repeating it. And eventually, you'll believe it, not because it's true, but because it's familiar. The more you repeat doubt, the more doubt becomes your reality. The more you repeat strength, the more strength becomes your baseline. It's not about truth, it's about exposure. You can even test it. Take any random fact, true or not, and say it to someone 3 or 4 times in different ways. Don't explain it. Just mention it. Slip it in. Later, ask them what they believe. Chances are, the idea will feel more believable than before. Not because you convinced them, but because you repeated it. That's the illusory truth effect. Repetition is persuasion. It's subtle, powerful, and completely irrational. And here's where it turns practical. If you want someone to believe in something, in a cause, in a purpose, in themselves, you don't need to argue. You just need to repeat, consistently, calmly, over time. And the message will settle. It will sink in. Not because they agreed with you right away, but because their brain adjusted to the sound of it. It's the same with yourself. If you want to shift your mindset, don't wait for motivation. Don't chase deep breakthroughs. Just pick the right sentence and repeat it every day. Every time the doubt creeps in, say it again and again and again. It'll sound fake at first, but give it time. Familiarity will win. The lie that held you back was built by repetition. So is the truth that sets you free. This paradox is as dangerous as it is useful, because the wrong repetition leads to mental traps. The right repetition builds mental strength. The brain doesn't care which one you choose. It just listens to what it hears the most. That's your power and your responsibility. So use it carefully. Repetition is not just a tool, it's a weapon, a mirror, a machine. It doesn't think, it only echoes. What you feed it, it grows. What you repeat, you believe. And that's the paradox. Truth doesn't have to be true. It only has to sound true, long enough, loud enough, often enough for your brain to let it in. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how small yeses can lead to big ones, even when they seem unrelated. It sounds too easy to be true. Ask someone 3 simple questions, get them to say yes 3 times, and suddenly they're more likely to say yes again to the thing you actually want. But that's exactly how it works. It's not about logic. It's about momentum. The more someone agrees with you, the more their brain wants to keep agreeing. It's called the yes ladder. And the paradox is this: the best way to get someone to say yes to something hard is to first get them to say yes to something easy. The shift happens quietly. You start with something obvious. It's warm in here, right? You've been working hard lately, haven't you? You like finding good deals, don't you? These are easy to agree with. No resistance, no pressure, just small yeses, safe yeses. And each time they say it, something happens inside them. Their mind starts building a pattern. Yes, yes, yes. Now that rhythm is in motion. And here's where the paradox kicks in. The brain wants to stay consistent. It doesn't want to break the pattern. Saying no after 3 yeses feels off. So when you finally ask for the real thing, the favor, the offer, the request, they're already halfway there. Not because they've thought it through, but because their mind has been nudged into a pattern of agreement. And this pattern pulls more than logic ever could. That's why this technique works better than arguing. Instead of convincing someone with facts, you guide them with agreement. You don't push them into yes, you walk them toward it, one small step at a time. It's not about tricking, it's about creating flow. Because the human brain doesn't like to jump between yes and no too quickly, it's smoother to keep going in one direction. And the more gentle the start, the easier the journey. Now imagine using this in real life. You're negotiating. You ask, "We both want this to work out, right?" They nod. "We're both aiming for something fair?" Another nod. "And we've already made some progress here?" That's 3 yeses. Now, when you make your real request, it lands softer. You've built a rhythm. And rhythms are hard to break. That's the strange truth. Agreement becomes a habit. Once started, it wants to continue. The paradox is that saying yes doesn't just reflect agreement, it creates it. The person starts feeling more aligned with you just by nodding, even if the first questions had nothing to do with the final one. The act of agreeing draws them closer. It creates the illusion of unity. And the brain wants unity more than conflict. This is why skilled communicators never jump straight to the hard ask. They warm it up. They start with questions that invite agreement, not to manipulate, but to create momentum. That momentum isn't loud. It's not obvious. It's just a quiet pull, a mental lean. And that lean makes all the difference. It's the same reason we nod during conversations without noticing. Once we nod once, we keep nodding. It's rhythm. It's flow. And when that rhythm is yes, it becomes hard to stop. But here's the deeper paradox. The yeses don't even have to be meaningful. They can be surface level, small talk, simple truths. You're busy today. It's been a long week. We all want things to get better. Each one adds to the rhythm. Each one lowers resistance. Each one brings them closer to the big yes you haven't even asked for yet. You're not forcing anything. You're just setting a tone, and tone has power. Because when you ask someone to agree with you, even about something small, it makes them feel included. It makes them feel in sync. And that feeling of being in sync makes them more open to continuing the conversation your way. That's why it works. Not because you tricked them, but because you built trust through agreement. You said, "We're on the same page, right?" And they said, "Yes." You said, "You want to feel more in control, right?" And they said, "Yes." By the third time, their brain already sees you as an ally, not an opponent. And when the final question comes, it doesn't feel like a leap. It feels like the next step in a pattern that's already started. Now here's the paradox within the paradox. This only works if it feels natural. If the yeses are too obvious or come too fast, it feels fake. The magic is in the flow, not the frequency. You guide, not push. You let it unfold, not force it through. If someone senses you're stacking yeses just to trap them, the whole thing collapses. But if it feels like a real conversation with real moments of agreement, the effect becomes real. And here's the wild part. It works on you too. The more you say yes, the more open you become. The more your mindset shifts toward agreement. Your own resistance softens. You start to trust more, connect more, accept more. It goes both ways. That's what makes this paradox so strange. Agreement builds more agreement, not just between people, but within people. Saying yes starts to reshape how someone sees you. It creates alignment, even if it's temporary. It says, "We're together in this." And that sense of togetherness is hard to resist. So the next time you need someone to say yes, don't start big. Start small. Start light. Ask 3 questions you already know they'll agree with. Let them say yes. Let their mind start walking with you. Then, when the moment is right, ask what you really want. You'll be surprised how far those early yeses can carry you. That's the paradox. Agreement doesn't come from force. It comes from flow. And a few small yeses are all it takes to build that flow. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how asking for advice brings people closer, while asking for opinions can push them away. It feels like those two things should be the same. You're just asking what someone thinks, right? But no, there's a sharp difference, and that difference is the key to connection. The paradox is this: when you ask for advice, you create respect and closeness. When you ask for opinions, you create distance and judgment. One opens hearts, the other triggers defenses. Here's how it works. When you ask someone for their opinion, you're inviting them to evaluate something, to judge it, to form a stance. And with that stance comes a silent challenge. They start thinking, do I agree or disagree? Do I like this or not? Do I approve of you, your idea, your approach? And now the conversation has weight. It's become a quiet battle between ideas. They speak, you react, and before you know it, you're not collaborating, you're comparing. But when you ask for advice, everything shifts. You're no longer asking them to judge, you're asking them to help. That small shift removes ego. It creates alignment. People feel useful, valued, intelligent. Their guard drops. Their energy changes. Instead of deciding what they think of your idea, they're now part of building it. That's the paradox. By giving up some control and asking for guidance, you gain influence. You might think that asking for advice puts you below the other person, like you're giving away power, but actually, it does the opposite. It makes people like you more, because you made them feel respected, important, heard, and that feeling makes them want to support you, not challenge you. Psychologically, giving advice triggers pride, not arrogance, but warmth. The helper feels smart. They feel like a mentor, not a critic. And the mind loves that role. When people feel smart around you, they start to associate that good feeling with you. But when you ask for an opinion, the brain shifts into a different mode. Now it has to protect itself. It starts thinking, what's the right answer? Or how will they take this? Or am I being tested here? It becomes a performance, and performance kills connection. That's why asking for advice builds bridges. It doesn't matter if you take the advice. It doesn't matter if you already know the answer. What matters is the gesture. You made space for their wisdom. And that makes people feel honored. Even if the topic is sensitive, asking for advice lowers the tension. You're saying, I trust your insight. I want to learn from you. That's hard to argue with. There's no battle in that sentence, just an open door. Now imagine this in real life. You have an idea you want someone to support. If you ask, what's your opinion on this? They pause, they analyze, they look for flaws. That's what the word opinion invites. But if you say, can I get your advice on how to improve this? They pause for a different reason. Now they're looking for how to add something, how to make it better, not whether it's good or bad. That's the difference. Opinions divide. Advice unites. And here's the hidden benefit. People are more likely to agree with something they helped shape. If they gave you advice on it, even a little, they're now invested. They'll root for it. They'll defend it, not because you convinced them, but because they were part of it. That's the paradox inside the paradox. When you ask for advice, people start agreeing with you, not because they saw your point, but because they helped build it. It works in conflicts too. If someone disagrees with you, don't say, why do you think I'm wrong? That's a trap. It invites defense. Instead say, what advice would you give me to better understand your side? Watch what happens. Their tone changes. They drop the armor. Now they're not defending. They're explaining. They're helping. And people love to help. That's what makes this simple switch so powerful. You don't need to change your ideas. You don't need to soften your stance. Just change the frame. Move from what do you think to what would you suggest? That one sentence pulls people closer. It works in leadership, in teamwork, in relationships, in negotiation, even in sales. The moment you ask for advice, the energy shifts. People stop resisting and start contributing. And here's the final twist. Asking for advice also makes you more likable. It signals humility, openness, curiosity. You're not pretending to know everything. You're saying, I value your voice, and that alone creates respect. So the next time you want someone on your side, don't ask them to judge. Ask them to guide. Let them feel wise. Let them contribute. Let them see that you're not just trying to win. You're trying to grow. That's the paradox. The fastest way to earn someone's support isn't to impress them. It's to ask for their wisdom. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how saying nothing can say everything as long as you're looking someone in the eye. It seems so small. A glance, a second. Just holding eye contact a bit longer than normal. But that tiny act changes how people see you. It changes how they feel. It changes what they believe. And here's the paradox. The more silent the action, the louder its impact. You don't raise your voice. You don't argue harder. You simply hold the gaze. And suddenly, you seem more confident, more sincere, more in control. You didn't add anything. You just stayed a moment longer. Strategic eye contact is power without pressure. When you look someone in the eyes, not awkwardly, not aggressively, just slightly longer than usual, you signal strength without force. You send a message that you believe what you're saying, that you're not hiding, and that you expect to be taken seriously. All of that in a single silent second. It doesn't make sense at first. We're told to use words to persuade, voice to command, movement to show passion. But this flips all of that. The eyes do the work. Stillness becomes the signal. Not blinking, not looking away, not filling space, just holding. And here's where the paradox tightens. When you hold eye contact longer, you feel more powerful, even if you weren't before. The act of holding someone's gaze doesn't just affect them, it shifts you. You feel steady. You feel grounded. You feel like you belong exactly where you are, saying exactly what you're saying. That's the secret. Eye contact doesn't just project confidence, it builds it. And the person across from you? They feel it too, not always consciously. They won't say, "You looked into my eyes for 2.3 seconds longer than expected." But they'll feel something, a slight pull, a sense of presence, a trust, a pause before they respond. That's the effect. It's invisible and undeniable. Because the eyes are not just for seeing, they're for feeling. We read emotions through them. We spot truth, hesitation, strength, fear. And when someone holds eye contact a little longer, we lean in, not physically, but emotionally. We pay more attention, we give more weight, we start believing more. This is why great speakers pause and look, why great leaders don't glance around the room when delivering something important. They anchor themselves, they land their words with their eyes, and that landing is what sticks. The paradox here is that doing less creates more. You don't have to shout, you don't have to over-explain, you don't even have to repeat yourself. You just say your line, and let your eyes do the rest. But there's a balance. Hold too long, and it turns strange. Too short, and it loses its effect. The magic is in the small extension, the half second that says, "I mean this," the delay that makes the moment real. And it's not just about confidence, it's about connection. When you make a point, and your eyes stay locked in, you create a bond. You're not looking through them. You're not distracted. You're fully present. That presence makes people feel respected, seen, understood. And when people feel that, they listen, they trust, they respond. Even in silence, eye contact speaks, especially in silence. That's the deeper paradox. Words can be doubted. Eye contact can't. You can fake a sentence. You can't fake presence. When you look into someone's eyes and hold steady, they feel the truth behind your words, or the lack of it. And that's what gives you authority. Not your tone, not your titles, not your volume, your stillness, your willingness to stay there, not flinch, not fill the moment with noise. Just meet them, hold it, let it land. This works in every direction, with strangers, with friends, in meetings, in conflict, in persuasion. You don't have to push harder. You just have to see them and let them know you're not looking away. Even in disagreement, strategic eye contact softens tension. You're not attacking. You're not backing down. You're simply holding. That holding says, "I respect you enough to stay with you. I'm not running from this." And that subtle act of staying in the moment with your eyes turns friction into dialogue. It's almost unfair how much power it holds, because while they're scrambling to find words, to impress, to defend, you're just steady, looking, present, and that presence becomes control. But the control isn't aggressive. That's what makes it different. You're not dominating the moment. You're owning it, quietly, calmly, clearly. And here's the strangest part. People remember the eye contact more than what you said. They might forget your exact words, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And eye contact makes people feel safe, seen, respected, or sometimes nervous, exposed, vulnerable. It depends on the context, but either way, it's unforgettable. So next time you speak, don't rush. Don't fill every space. Say your point. Then look. Hold it. Let it sit. Let them feel the weight of it. Let your eyes carry what your voice doesn't need to repeat. That's the paradox. Your words don't always make the point stronger. Your eyes do, and all it takes is a little longer than normal. Just enough to be felt, not enough to be feared. That's the space where presence lives, where sincerity shows. where power speaks without sound. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how saying less, more slowly, makes you seem smarter and more powerful. It doesn't feel right at first. You'd think the faster you talk, the more you prove you know what you're saying. That speed shows sharpness. That quick thinking means confidence. But the truth is the opposite. Rushed speech sounds anxious. Fast talking feels like you're trying to outrun doubt. It sounds like you don't even believe your own words. And that's the paradox. The slower you speak, the stronger you seem. Confidence doesn't rush. It doesn't race. It moves with intention. When someone speaks slowly, clearly, and calmly, people lean in. Not because of volume, not because of vocabulary, but because of pace. Slowness signals control. It tells people you're not afraid of silence. You're not trying to fill space. You're not desperate to be accepted. You're comfortable with your own presence, and that's power. The paradox deepens here. If you want to be taken seriously, don't try to sound impressive. Try to sound certain, and certainty lives in silence, in pauses, in breathing, in giving your words room to land. When you rush, words stack on top of each other. Meaning gets lost. People feel your tension, but when you slow down, your message has weight. Each word gets its own moment, and people don't just hear what you say, they feel it. That's what changes everything. A slow voice isn't just easier to follow, it feels more true. The brain treats slower speech as more thoughtful, more honest, more wise, because fast speech often triggers the wrong signals. It feels like sales, like performance, like nerves. Slow speech, though, it feels like belief, like you stand by what you're saying. This is why great speakers pause, why leaders speak with rhythm, why the words you remember most are often delivered at half speed. It's not about being dramatic, it's about being present. Rushed speech escapes the moment. Slow speech anchors it. And that's where the paradox becomes a tool. If you're ever unsure, slow down. People won't think you're lost. They'll think you're measured, in control, even when you aren't. That's the power of pace. It doesn't just reflect confidence, it creates it. Your breathing slows, your thoughts settle, and the room adjusts to you. That's a key shift. When you speak fast, you're reacting to the room. You're trying to keep their attention. But when you slow down, the room reacts to you. Your pace becomes the dominant energy, and people match it. They give you time because you're showing them you're not in a hurry. You're not chasing approval. You're guiding attention. Think about the people who seem the most respected in conversations. They never rush. They never panic to be heard. They wait. They speak when it matters. And when they do, they speak with quiet control. No shouting, no racing. Just a calm voice that cuts through noise. That's the paradox again. You get heard more by speaking less and more slowly. Speed is not power. Clarity is. When you slow down, you become easier to understand. And what's easy to understand is easier to believe. You reduce friction. You reduce confusion. You sound like someone who doesn't need to prove anything. Because rushing is often a symptom of fear. Fear of silence, fear of rejection, fear of being interrupted. But when you trust your message, you don't need to rush it. You let it breathe. This works in pressure moments too. Interviews, negotiations, presentations. The instinct is to fill every gap, to keep talking, to avoid dead space. But those who pause are the ones who get remembered. They're the ones who land their words, not because of more content, but because of better timing. Each pause is a spotlight. It tells people, this part matters. It adds gravity, and gravity holds attention. Even in casual conversation, it works. Speaking slowly doesn't make you boring. It makes you focused. It shows that you're thinking as you speak, not just spilling words, and that thoughtfulness builds trust. People assume fast talkers are selling something. They assume slow talkers know something. And here's the twist. You don't need to change your message at all, just your speed. The same sentence, said slowly, sounds like insight. Said fast, it sounds like filler. It's not the words, it's the delivery. The paradox reaches its core here. You sound smarter not by speaking faster, but by making space between your words. Space is where meaning lives, not in the words, but around them. Let's say you want to make a strong point. You say it fast, it flies by. People nod maybe, then forget, but say it slowly, with a pause before and after, and it becomes something else. It becomes something they remember, not because it was new, but because you gave it weight. That's the game. Slow speech adds weight to your words. It's a subtle shift, but a powerful one. And the best part? You don't have to master it instantly. Just start small. Pick one moment a day, one sentence, slow it down, let it land. Watch how people respond, then do it again, slowly, steadily, just like your voice. Because the more you do it, the more natural it becomes. You'll start to feel the shift inside too. Less rushing, less noise, more control, more calm, and others will feel it too, without even knowing why. That's the paradox. People won't remember everything you said, but they will remember how you said it. And if you said it slowly, they'll remember you. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how something becomes more valuable the moment it becomes harder to get, even if it hasn't changed at all. This is the paradox of scarcity, the idea that when something is rare or about to disappear, people suddenly want it more, not because it's better, not because it improved, but because it might not be there tomorrow. That fear of missing out turns ordinary into urgent, and that urgency creates desire. The strangest part? You don't have to change the product, the idea, or the offer. You just change the availability. You say, only a few left, limited time, almost gone, and suddenly, people can't look away. Here's the twist. Nothing actually changed, except how people see it. This is why the paradox is so powerful. You increase value by creating loss, not by adding anything new. People don't just want things that are good, they want things that are going away. The same thing that sat untouched yesterday becomes precious today if there's a chance it won't be there tomorrow. Logic says the thing has the same worth. Emotion says it's slipping through your fingers, and emotion almost always wins. People respond more to loss than to gain. Tell them they might miss something, and they move faster than if you tell them they might benefit. Scarcity grabs the survival part of the brain. It whispers, act now or regret it. That pressure makes people move, and that movement is what creates momentum, sales, decisions, change. This is why marketers use countdowns, why stores mark last chance, why people line up for products that are exclusive or limited edition. It's not always because the product is better. It's because it feels scarcer, and scarcity changes perception. Here's where the paradox tightens. The value didn't rise, but the urgency did, and urgency is often stronger than value. You can have something truly useful, and people won't care until they think they might not be able to have it anymore. Then suddenly it matters, not because it became better, but because it became fragile, fleeting, temporary. And that shift, from forever to maybe not, makes all the difference. It works in conversation too. If you say, this opportunity won't last, or I won't always be available for this, you create a shift. Now people look at what you're offering through the lens of time, and time creates pressure. Pressure makes decisions, and decisions are where change begins. This is why tickets that say, only 2 seats left, sell faster. Why people act when the clock is ticking. Why something that was ignored yesterday becomes must-have today, just because it might vanish. We don't want to lose, so we rush in. But here's the deeper twist. Even fake scarcity works. The brain doesn't wait to check if it's true. If something feels rare, it responds. That's why urgency in messaging matters more than technical details. It's not about logic, it's about emotion. And emotion doesn't ask questions. This is also why people chase exclusivity. They want what not everyone can have. They want to feel like they got in before the doors closed. Even if the thing is the same, the fact that not everyone gets it makes it feel special. The value shifts not in the product, but in the access. Scarcity makes things feel earned, and what feels earned feels more valuable. That's the paradox again. You don't need to change the thing. You just need to change the context. But there's a limit. If people feel like the scarcity is fake, it backfires. It has to feel real, or at least possible. You can't say, only 5 spots left every single week. The brain adjusts. It starts ignoring it. For scarcity to work, it must feel honest, unexpected, true enough to trigger urgency. When it does, people respond fast, faster than reason, faster than comparison. They skip the normal hesitation and leap, not always because they want it, but because they fear not getting it. Scarcity flips the equation. It's no longer, do I want this? It becomes, what if I can't have this? And that fear makes them move. Here's where it gets even stranger. When someone finally gets the thing they almost lost, they often value it more. They protect it, talk about it, feel proud of it, not because of what it is, but because of how hard it was to get. That's the illusion scarcity creates. Struggle adds meaning. Rarity adds weight. We don't just want what's scarce, we treasure it more once we have it. And sometimes, the desire fades once it's no longer scarce. That's the danger hidden inside. If everything is always available, people stop chasing it. But if things feel limited, rare, special, they become alive. Not because they changed, but because we did, because our perspective shifted. And that shift is what scarcity controls. You don't need more features. You don't need to shout louder. Just shorten the time, limit the spots, reduce the access, and suddenly people see what was always there as something that might be gone. And that potential loss becomes the trigger. So next time you want someone to care, don't just talk about what it is. Talk about how long it'll last, how rare it is, how quickly it might disappear. Let their mind do the math. Let their heart do the rest. Because that's the paradox. You don't raise value by adding anything. You raise value by removing it from easy reach. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how one small word can quietly unlock doors, because it seems too simple, too soft, but this one word changes everything. When you use it, even with a weak reason, people are far more likely to say yes, not because your reason is convincing, but because your structure is familiar. That's the paradox. People don't always respond to what your reason is. They respond to the fact that you gave one. Because signals a reason is coming, and the brain relaxes. It stops resisting. It listens differently. That one word flips a mental switch. Without it, a request sounds random or demanding. With it, the same request sounds justified, even if the logic behind it is thin. It's not the strength of your reason, it's the rhythm of the sentence. You say, "Can I go ahead of you in line?" and people hesitate. But if you say, "Can I go ahead of you in line because I need to make a quick call?" they're more likely to agree, even if the reason isn't urgent, even if everyone in line also has things to do. The difference is that you used the key, and the key is because. This is why the paradox is so strange. A weak reason can still create strong results, because isn't about convincing, it's about sounding like you are. The moment people hear it, they expect logic. They assume you've thought it through. They give you credit for intention. And most won't stop to ask if your reason really makes sense. Their brain hears the structure, and the structure feels safe. This is a shortcut buried deep in how people process communication. Humans love patterns, and because creates one. Request, reason, response. It feels complete, familiar. It tells the mind, this is a valid sequence. And the mind likes valid sequences more than it likes analyzing every detail. So people go along with it. That's why salespeople use it, why leaders use it, why even parents and teachers lean on it. Because it frames the message as thought out, whether it is or not. And here's where it gets even more interesting. If you say, I need your help, people might pause. But if you say, I need your help because it'll make a big difference, they respond quicker, not because that sentence is powerful, but because it feels finished. That's the trick. Because makes your sentence feel like it belongs, even if the rest of the sentence is fluff. You say, could you review this for me? And it feels like a task. You say, could you review this for me because I value your perspective? And suddenly, it feels like a compliment, like purpose, like connection, same task, different frame, and that frame changes everything. People don't just respond to content, they respond to structure, and because gives structure a spine. This works in conflict too. If you say, I need space, it can sound cold, but say, I need space because I want to be clear-headed when we talk, and it changes the tone. Now, it's not rejection, it's responsibility. That one word reshapes the meaning. The deeper paradox? The reason itself matters less than we think. People aren't logical first, they're emotional. They're wired for shortcuts. Because is one of those shortcuts. It tells them something is being explained, even if they don't fully process the explanation. And since most people don't want to analyze every interaction, they accept what sounds familiar. They respond to the pattern more than the words. That's the quiet power here. You're not being manipulative. You're just understanding how language guides decisions. You're not pushing harder. You're paving the road. The word because lowers resistance. It calms the part of the brain that wants to say no. It softens the wall that blocks agreement. It makes the ask sound more human, more valid, more natural. It's a tiny word, but it opens big doors. Even when you give yourself permission, it helps. Saying I'm going to rest feels one way. Saying I'm going to rest because I've earned it feels different. You just gave yourself justification, and justification reinforces action. This works in your own mind too. If you say, I'm going to work out, it's a task, but say, I'm going to work out because I want to feel strong, and now it's identity, purpose, drive. The brain likes reasons, even small ones, especially small ones, because small reasons don't trigger big resistance. So whether you're asking someone for something or reminding yourself why you're doing something, drop that one word into your sentence. Because. Say it slowly, with intention. Let it carry the rest. And the rest will carry more weight. That's the paradox. The word because doesn't just follow a reason, it becomes the reason. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how the smallest yes can lead to the biggest one, as long as you start small enough. This is the foot in the door technique. You ask for something tiny, easy, barely noticeable, something no one would say no to, and once they say yes to that, you follow up with what you really want, the bigger ask, the real goal. And the paradox is this: the best way to get someone to agree to something big is to first get them to agree to something small, not because the small thing matters, but because saying yes once makes saying yes again easier. It works because people want to be consistent. Once they agree to the first request, their brain starts to build a version of themselves that says, I'm helpful. I support this. I said yes before, so I should probably say yes again. And just like that, the door cracks open. Not by force, not by logic, but by momentum. The first yes is the foot. The second yes is the open door. That's why the paradox is so powerful. You don't have to convince someone all at once. You just lead them down a path they already stepped on. You ask, can I borrow a minute of your time? They say yes. You say, "Thanks. Now that I've got your attention, could I show you this idea?" Now they're leaning in. They're involved, not because you convinced them, but because they already agreed once, and now they're just following their own rhythm. It's a psychological trick, but not a dirty one. You're not deceiving. You're just starting with something simple, and simplicity builds trust. People say yes to small things because they feel easy. They don't cost much, but that small yes starts to shape the story they're telling themselves. A story where they're the kind of person who helps, who participates, who agrees. And people like their story to stay the same. Here's where the paradox deepens. You're more likely to get the big thing when you ask for the small thing first, even if the small thing has nothing to do with the big one. It's not about logic. It's about commitment. Agreement creates inertia. The mind wants to stay in motion. It doesn't want to stop and rethink everything. It wants to stay on the path it already started. And that path leads straight through the second door. So what kind of small requests work? Anything that's quick and low pressure. Can you help me carry this? Before asking for more time. Can I get your opinion on something? Before introducing your idea. Would you sign this petition? Before asking for a donation. Once the first yes happens, the second one is already halfway there. It works because it shifts identity. People don't want to contradict themselves. If I helped you 5 minutes ago, I'll feel strange refusing you now. If I said yes before, I want to keep saying yes. It feels smoother. It feels natural. And that natural flow keeps things moving forward. But here's the strange part. If you start with the big ask first, people are more likely to say no, even if they would have said yes eventually, because now they feel pressure. They feel like you're jumping too far too fast. They pull back. They protect their space. But if you ease them into it, if you make it easy to say yes at first, they rarely even notice the shift. The second yes doesn't feel like a new choice. It feels like a continuation of the first one. That's the magic. The brain doesn't like starting over. It likes following through. You're not pushing people. You're walking with them, step by step, request by request, until they're somewhere they never would have agreed to at the start, but they're happy to be there now. And here's the paradox within the paradox. They'll even feel better about saying yes to the big thing if they said yes to something smaller first. Because now, the second yes feels earned. It feels honest. They don't feel tricked. They feel consistent. That's the key. You're not forcing compliance. You're building self-image. And self-image is powerful. Once someone believes, I'm someone who supports this, I'm helpful, or I'm involved, they carry that forward. They protect that idea. And your job is just to plant the seed with something easy, something almost too small to fail. Then you let that seed grow into something bigger. This technique works everywhere, in conversations, in sales, in leadership, in negotiation. You don't start with the full proposal. You start with one line, one ask, one soft entry. Then you build, layer by layer. And each yes makes the next one more likely. But it only works if the first ask is real. If it feels forced or fake, the chain breaks. The person steps back. They feel manipulated. So the small request must feel genuine, useful, kind. That's how you build trust. And trust is what makes the second ask land. Even when the second ask is bold, that's what makes this paradox so clever. You don't need to change their mind. You don't need to argue. You just need to start where they already are, saying yes to something easy. Then let that yes carry them forward. One step, then another, until the big ask doesn't feel big anymore. Because by then, it's just the next logical move. That's the paradox. You get someone to agree to something big by first asking for something so small they can't say no. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how simply moving your head up and down can quietly move someone else's thoughts in the same direction. It sounds too subtle to matter, but nodding while you speak, especially while making a point, can make people more likely to agree with you. Not because your words are better or your logic is stronger, but because your body is agreeing with itself. And here's the paradox. When you silently say yes with your head, other people feel like they should say yes too, even if they don't know why. This is nonverbal suggestion in its simplest form. You nod while speaking, and the other person's brain, without thinking, mirrors the motion. Their body wants to match yours. And when their body starts nodding, even a little, their mind follows. Because once the body starts saying yes, the brain starts wondering what it's agreeing with. That's the trick. You don't just say your point, you show it. Nodding is one of the oldest, most universal signs of agreement. It signals trust, understanding, alignment. It's not loud, it's not forced, but it carries weight. When you nod while speaking, you create a loop. You're confirming what you're saying as you say it, and that confirmation becomes contagious. Now here's where the paradox tightens. You're not asking for agreement, you're modeling it. And people follow what's modeled more than what's said. They respond to what feels natural. If you look calm and certain, and your head says yes while your voice speaks clearly, they're much more likely to go along with it. Even if they're not aware of it, they feel the pull, because agreement feels easier when it's already happening in front of them. This works even if they were unsure before. If you nod while you say something like, "This makes sense," or "Most people agree with this part," their brain starts checking. They look for proof. And the first proof they see is you. You believe it. You're nodding. You're steady. That's enough to tip the scale. And that's the paradox. You increase belief by physically behaving as if the belief is already shared. It's not just about persuading others, it affects you too. When you nod, you start feeling more certain, more aligned. Your brain reads your body language and thinks, "We agree with this, we believe this," and that inner belief gives your words strength. You speak with more clarity, more rhythm, more control, all from a simple gesture. Now imagine using this in everyday conversations. You're sharing an idea, and you nod slowly while speaking, not aggressively, just naturally, as if what you're saying is already agreed on. The other person watches, listens, and starts nodding too. They might not notice it, but their brain is syncing with yours. Their body is joining the rhythm. And that physical match often leads to mental agreement, not because they were convinced, but because they were carried into it. You don't need to debate. You don't need to win. You just need to lead with your body. And nodding is one of the simplest ways to lead agreement without speaking about agreement at all. This is where it gets strange. People will often defend ideas they agreed with in moments like these, even if they didn't fully understand them at first. Because once their body says yes, their brain starts filling in the blanks. It backfills logic. It finds reasons after the motion is already in play. So by nodding, you're not just influencing agreement, you're creating space for them to build belief on their own. That's the real power. You're not telling them to agree, you're inviting them to agree without saying a word. But the nod must be subtle. Too much, and it feels fake. Too fast, and it feels pushy. It only works when it matches your tone, when it's calm, steady, and in sync with your voice, like the words and the movement were born from the same place. That's how it becomes invisible influence. People don't say, "I agreed," because they nodded. They say, "I just felt like they were right," and they'll never know why. This paradox works best when used with care. You're not trying to trick people. You're reinforcing connection. You're showing certainty without forcing it. You're guiding agreement by living it. And that's what makes it so powerful. It's influence without effort, persuasion without pressure, presence without performance. Even when listening, nodding works. If someone is talking and you nod while they speak, they feel heard, understood, validated. That makes them more open to what you'll say next. Their guard drops, their trust builds, their mind opens, all from a silent motion. So whether you're speaking or listening, the nod has power. It's your quiet agreement with the moment, and that quiet agreement becomes contagious. The paradox couldn't be simpler. The more you show agreement before it exists, the more likely it is to appear. So next time you speak, nod gently. Let your head say yes while your voice tells the story, and let their mind follow where their body is already headed. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how saying nothing after you speak can say everything. It's one of the strangest tricks in negotiation. You make your offer, you say your number, you explain your side, and then you stop. You don't explain further. You don't justify it. You don't soften it. You let the words land, and you go silent. That silence becomes the real pressure. And here's the paradox. The less you say, the more control you gain. It feels wrong. It feels like you should fill the gap, like you should keep talking, keep persuading, keep showing how fair or generous you're being. But silence is stronger than any explanation. When you stop talking, the air gets heavy. The other person feels it, and because people hate awkward silence, they rush to fill it. And that's where things start to shift in your favor, because now they are the ones speaking. And when they speak, they reveal, they react, they bend. Sometimes they'll justify their own position. Sometimes they'll talk themselves into accepting yours. Sometimes they'll even improve the deal without you asking. Not because you said more, but because you said nothing. This is why the paradox works. In negotiation, power doesn't come from who talks the most. It comes from who can wait the longest, who can sit in the tension, who can let silence stretch just enough for the other person to crack first. You're not being rude. You're being strategic. Silence makes people uncomfortable, especially in negotiation. When you make an offer and go quiet, the other person starts wondering, are you done? Are you confident? Are you waiting for something? That wondering turns into pressure, and pressure turns into movement. If you keep talking, you relieve the pressure. If you go silent, you build it. That's the power. The moment you go quiet, the other person's mind starts racing. They replay what you said. They guess what you're thinking. They start speaking, not to persuade you, but to calm themselves. And in doing so, they often reveal what they really want, or how far they're willing to go, or how much wiggle room they truly have. Silence becomes a mirror. It shows them to themselves. It also signals something very important, confidence. When you can sit silently after your offer, it says, I've said what I needed to say. I'm not chasing your approval. I'll wait. That waiting, that stillness, becomes presence. It becomes power. And here's the strange twist. Even when you're nervous, silence makes you look strong. It creates the image of calm, the illusion of certainty. Even if inside you're unsure, the quiet outside tells a different story, and people respond to that story. They start thinking you have the advantage. That's the paradox again. By removing noise, you gain attention. By creating space, you create pressure. By saying less, you say more. Now imagine this in real life. You're negotiating a salary. You say, I'm looking for $70,000. And then you stop. You don't explain why. You don't add, but I'm flexible. Or, if that's too much, I understand. You just say the number and wait. What happens? They shift in their seat. They glance down. They hesitate. And then they talk. Maybe they say, let me see what I can do. Maybe they say, that's higher than we budgeted. But the important part is, they're reacting. And now you're in control, not by pushing, but by waiting. That's how silence does the work, because the longer it stretches, the more the other person feels they have to respond. People can only sit in discomfort for so long, and negotiation is full of discomfort. That's why silence is your best tool. It doesn't argue, it doesn't shout, it just waits, but it waits with weight. You can even practice this. Make your offer. Count to 5 in your head. Don't say a word. Just breathe. Let the moment stretch. Most people can't even last 3 seconds. They jump in. They break their own tension. They weaken their own position. But if you stay still, you win. Because the real battle isn't in what's said, it's in what's not. That's what most people miss. They think negotiation is about clever lines and strong arguments, but often it's just about who can handle silence better, who can hold the line without saying a word. And that person usually walks away with the better deal. Even in personal situations, it works. You're asking someone for something important. You say your piece. You look at them, and then you stop. No more words, no overthinking, just presence. The other person now feels the need to respond, to move, to say something. And that's when the real conversation begins. Because people reveal themselves in the gap between words, the gap where silence lives. That's where the truth comes out. That's where offers improve. That's where power shifts, not because you demanded it, but because you didn't rush to fill the silence. So next time you're negotiating, don't just prepare what to say. Prepare what to not say. Practice the pause. Make your offer and sit with it. Let the silence do what your words can't. Let it build. Let it press. Let it work. Because that's the paradox. In negotiation, your greatest move is often the one where you say nothing at all. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how getting someone to say yes to the obvious can lead them to say yes to the unexpected. This is the yes ladder. It's simple, silent, and strange. You start with easy questions, safe questions, the kind no one wants to say no to. Do you care about your health? Do you like getting the best deal? Would you want to make your life easier? Questions with answers that are almost always yes. Not because the person is convinced, but because the question feels agreeable. Now here's the paradox. Those first small yeses have nothing to do with your product, but they quietly prepare the person to say yes when it matters. Each yes becomes a step. One step makes the next easier. The more they agree, the more likely they are to keep agreeing. And when you finally offer what you're really selling, your service, your product, your pitch, it feels like the next logical step. Not a jump, not a surprise, just part of the yes pattern they've already started building. That's how the ladder works. You don't start at the top. You let them climb. And here's what makes it powerful. People want to stay consistent. If they say yes once, twice, 3 times, their brain starts building a self-image. I'm someone who agrees with this. I'm someone who sees the value here. That identity becomes momentum. They want to protect it. They want their next answer to match the ones they already gave. So saying yes becomes easier than saying no. Even if the final yes is something they never would have said yes to at the start. That's the strange magic. You didn't change the product. You didn't even push. You just asked simple questions and let their own words carry them forward. Now think about how this plays out in sales. You walk up to someone and say, "Would you like to save some money today?" They say yes. You follow up, "Do you care about keeping your home safe?" Another yes. "Do you agree it's important to protect your investment?" Yes again. And now, after 3 yeses, you say, "Let me show you a system that does all of that." And suddenly, the pitch doesn't feel like pressure. It feels like a solution, a fit, a match for what they already agreed to. That's the paradox again. The pitch lands better after a series of questions that had nothing to do with the product, but everything to do with preparing the mind. Each yes makes the brain more open, less defensive, more involved, and that involvement becomes commitment. The person is no longer just listening, they're participating, they're shaping the conversation. And when people feel involved, they become invested. They don't just want to listen, they want to follow through. But here's where it gets tricky. The first questions have to feel natural. You can't just stack yeses like a trick. The questions need to feel like part of a real conversation, like you're building a shared space. If it feels forced, the ladder breaks. But if it feels smooth, the climb becomes automatic. And now you're guiding them, not by telling them what to think, but by helping them discover what they already agree with. That's the key. The yes ladder doesn't force belief. It frames it. You start from where they already are, then walk with them. Even outside of sales, this works. You want someone to support a plan, adopt a habit, change their mind. Don't start with the ask. Start with the easy agreements, the shared values, the common ground. Let them nod. Let them say yes. Let them feel aligned. Then bring in your real idea and watch how much softer it lands. Because now it's not a demand, it's a continuation. That's what the yes ladder does. It turns a hard ask into a natural next step. It feels less like selling and more like agreement. But the real paradox is this. The first yeses don't have to mean anything. They just have to feel good. The first yes might be about saving time. The second about doing what's smart. The third about something as vague as making things better. None of these are about the sale, but they build the mood, the tone, the rhythm of yes. And the rhythm is what matters. Once someone's in rhythm, they don't want to stop. Saying no suddenly feels disruptive. It feels off. So they say yes again, because it matches the pattern they're already in. This is why the best salespeople don't argue. They don't force. They create flow. They start with questions that get agreement and let the person walk into the pitch on their own. And when the person says yes to the final offer, it doesn't feel like pressure. It feels like momentum, because their own answers brought them here. So next time you want someone to say yes, don't start with what you want. Start with what they already believe. Build the steps. Make them easy. Make them obvious. Then lead them up the ladder, slowly, smoothly. And by the time they reach the top, saying yes to your offer won't feel like a decision. It'll feel like the next step they were already taking. That's the paradox. The easiest way to get someone to agree with you is to help them agree with themselves first. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how 3 is more than enough, even when more exists. It shouldn't matter. If something is true, why would it matter how many pieces of information you give? But the mind doesn't work on truth alone. It works on patterns. And here's the strange truth. People are far more likely to remember something if it comes in a group of 3. Not 4, not 5, just 3. That's the paradox. Less detail makes the message feel more complete. You've seen this everywhere. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Stop, drop, and roll. Mind, body, spirit, 3 sticks, 3 beats, 3 moments. It just works. It clicks. It lands. And once it lands, it sticks. There's no rule that says 3 is the best. It just feels the best. Too short, and it feels incomplete. Too long, and it feels like effort. But 3 hits the sweet spot. It's the brain's favorite rhythm. The structure it doesn't need to think about. It hears 3 points and automatically feels closure. That's the power of this paradox. You say more by using less. You influence better by being simpler. You make people remember your message not by making it heavier, but by making it balanced. 1 is random, 2 is a pair, but 3 is a pattern. And the brain loves patterns. So when you're trying to explain something, persuade someone, or leave a lasting impression, don't list everything. Just group your message into three. 3 reasons, 3 benefits, 3 promises, and watch how people nod. Not because your points are stronger, but because your structure is. Structure creates belief before the content even settles in. That's why people will remember your message long after they forget your exact words. They remember the rhythm, the flow, the shape of it. And 3 creates that shape better than anything else. This isn't about logic, it's about feel. 3s feel natural. They feel trustworthy. Even kids use them in jokes and stories. A man walks into a bar. Then comes character 1, character 2, and the punchline, character 3. That third one makes it land. And here's the deeper twist. You don't need more information to be more convincing. You just need better packaging. 3 feels complete, and people trust what feels complete. So when you deliver something in 3s, the brain says, that makes sense. Not because it understood every word, but because it understood the form. Form leads feeling. Feeling leads belief. That's why in advertising you hear fast, easy, reliable. That's why speakers say, here's what we'll do. Step 1, step 2, step 3. That's why stories are told in acts, beginning, middle, end. You don't need a dozen reasons, just 3 well-timed ones. Because 3 is enough to convince without overwhelming. This works in conversation too. If you want to make a point, don't ramble. Break it down into 3 parts. Say, here's what I think. First, we need clarity. Second, we need speed. Third, we need follow-through. That line sounds sharp, simple, solid. It lands with weight, even if each point is just 1 sentence long. You didn't say much, but it sounded like you did. That's the paradox again. Speaking in 3s makes you sound more complete, even when you're saying less. It also helps people feel smart. When you present something in 3 parts, they can follow it easily. They can repeat it. They can share it with others. And when someone can repeat your message, it becomes theirs. Now they carry it forward, not because you pushed it, but because you made it easy to carry. The easier your message is to remember, the more powerful it becomes. So in a world full of noise, data, and overload, 3s are your filter. They help your message rise above. They help your voice cut through. They help people grasp what matters. Even in emotion, this works. You say, I'm not just disappointed. I'm frustrated, confused, and honestly, let down. 3 feelings. And suddenly, your message feels real. It has depth. It has shape. It doesn't ramble. It resonates. And when people feel it, they remember it. You could say 10 things. You could list 20 facts. But none of them will matter as much as 3 simple, sticky lines that feel like they belong together. This is why the rule of 3s is used everywhere. In writing, in music, in movies, in branding. Not because it's a rule, but because it works. It works not because of what it says, but because of how it says it. 3 points are not just information, they're persuasion in disguise. And it doesn't matter if your idea is small or big, if your pitch is for 1 person or 100, the power stays the same. Talk in 3s, structure in 3s, think in 3s. Because 3 is the number the brain trusts, even when it doesn't notice it. So next time you want to explain something, influence someone, or simply be remembered, don't overwhelm them. Give them 3 points, not 4, not 2, 3. Enough to make your message feel strong, short enough to make it stay. That's the paradox. The mind believes more when it's told just enough, and no more than 3. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how you can stay in control by letting other people choose. It sounds like you're giving up power. When you offer someone a choice, it seems like you're handing them control. But here's the twist. You're only offering choices that you created, and both lead exactly where you want them to go. That's the paradox. When you let people decide between 2 of your options, they feel independent, but you're still steering the whole situation. This is called offering controlled choices. You don't ask, "Do you want to do this?" because that invites a yes or a no, and they might say no. Instead, you ask, "Would you prefer this or that?" Now there's no number, just two doors, both open to the same house. You just let them pick which door they like more, and because they chose, they feel ownership. That ownership is everything. When people feel like they're in charge, they become more open, more committed, more cooperative, not because you gave them freedom, but because you gave them the illusion of freedom. That illusion creates real behavior. You stay in control, but they feel in charge. It works with kids. Do you want to brush your teeth now or in 5 minutes? Either way, the teeth get brushed. It works in business. Would you prefer to start the project Monday or Wednesday? Either way, the project starts. It works in relationships. Do you want to talk about this over dinner or after we rest? Either way, the conversation happens. You frame it, they pick, and the mind relaxes. Here's why it works. People hate being told what to do, even when it's simple, even when they agree. If it feels like a command, something inside resists. But if it feels like a choice, that resistance drops. Suddenly, it's their decision, and people don't fight their own choices. That's the trick, letting them choose how, not if. It feels like freedom, but you shape the outcome before they even spoke. That's the paradox again. You stay in control by not acting like you are. The moment you stop trying to force direction and start offering options, you become more persuasive, not because your argument changed, but because the frame did. You're no longer pushing, you're guiding. You're still the architect, but now they feel like the builder. This works because people want autonomy. It's hardwired. The moment they feel choice, they feel safer, more respected. Even if both choices were made by you, the very act of choosing gives them peace. And that peace turns into action. Now imagine using this in sales. Instead of saying, "Would you like to sign up today?" you say, "Would you prefer to start with the monthly plan or the yearly?" Instead of saying, "Can I send you a follow-up?" you ask, "Should I call you Thursday or Friday?" Same goal, but now they're choosing, not resisting. Even better, when they make that small choice, they're more likely to follow through, because now they set the terms. They feel more committed, not because the options were perfect, but because they picked one, and what people pick, they protect. The deeper paradox? The more options you offer, the less control you have. So keep it simple. 2 choices, maybe 3, but never too many. Too much choice creates anxiety. People freeze. But just enough choice makes them move, because they don't feel forced. They feel free. And yet, you're still in the driver's seat. This works in writing, in leadership, in parenting, in persuasion. Anywhere people need to feel like they have a voice, you give them the space to choose, but only within your lines. You become the painter. They get to choose the color, but you built the canvas. That's the secret. You let them personalize what you already planned. And the plan sticks harder when it feels like theirs. Even in conflict, this works. Do you want to cool off for 10 minutes or talk it through now? The conversation happens either way, but now there's no power struggle, no control fight, just calm steps, because it feels fair. That fairness changes everything. People don't always need to win. They just need to feel like they were included. And giving a choice, even a simple one, does exactly that. It makes the outcome feel shared. And shared outcomes get stronger results. So next time you want someone to do something, don't demand, don't plead, don't push. Just offer a frame, 2 paths, both leading to the same goal, and let them walk whichever one feels right to them. They'll feel independent, empowered, in charge, and yet you'll have guided every step of the way. That's the paradox. When you give people control on your terms, they follow through faster, with more trust, more ease, and more belief. because they chose to. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how giving someone permission to say no actually makes them more likely to say yes. It feels like the wrong move. You make a request, then immediately say, "But you're free to decide." It sounds like you're weakening your position, softening your ask, giving up control. But that's exactly what makes it work. This is called the "but you are free" technique. And here's the paradox. When people feel free to refuse, they feel more comfortable accepting. It comes down to pressure. When people sense pressure, they push back. It's automatic. If they feel like you're trying to corner them, convince them, force them, even a simple request becomes heavy. Their brain turns defensive. Even if they agree with your request, the tone makes them want to pull away. But when you say, "You're totally free to decide," that wall drops. The pressure disappears. And now they're not being pushed into a decision. They're stepping into it on their own. And people are far more likely to act when they feel it was their choice. That's why this works. You're not just asking, you're giving space, you're showing respect, you're saying, "Here's what I need, but I trust you to choose." And trust is rare. It catches people off guard. It feels different. Most people expect manipulation, persuasion, tactics. But when you follow a request with, "You're totally free to decide," the entire energy changes. You're no longer pulling them, you're inviting them. And people respond better to invitation than pressure. Here's how it looks in real life. "Hey, could you help me move this weekend?" But no pressure. You're free to decide. Or, "Would you mind filling out this quick survey? Totally up to you." That little phrase at the end, "You're free to decide," feels casual, but it shifts everything. It lowers resistance, which raises compliance. That's the paradox in action. The less you try to control someone, the more they choose to help you. Even in sales, it works. You say, "We think this plan would be perfect for you," but of course you're free to decide what fits best. Now, it doesn't feel like a pitch. It feels like a suggestion, and suggestions feel safer than demands, because no one likes feeling trapped. The human brain craves autonomy. We want to feel like we're in charge, like our actions come from us, not someone else. And when that freedom is taken away, even slightly, we resist. But when someone hands it to us, even in words, we lean in, we soften, we say yes more often. Not because we were convinced, but because we felt in control. That's the strange part. This isn't about persuasion, it's about permission. When people feel free to choose, they often choose to help, not out of guilt, not out of pressure, but because the request came with respect. Even parents use this with kids. "Can you clean your room today?" But it's your choice when you do it. Now the kid doesn't feel bossed around. They feel like they're making a grown-up decision, and they're more likely to follow through. Because it doesn't feel like an order. It feels like a responsibility they accepted on their own. That's what makes this paradox so powerful. It's not loud, it's not clever, it's just a small phrase that flips the entire emotional response to a request. And it works even when people know what you're doing. Because it still feels better than being told. It's all in the delivery. You're not begging. You're not backing down. You're making a confident request and then releasing control. You're saying, "Here's what I'd love from you," but it's your decision. And people respect that because it respects them. It makes the interaction feel human, not transactional. Even in tough conversations, this technique softens the edges. I'd appreciate it if we could keep this between us. But of course, you're free to handle it how you think is best. Now the other person isn't reacting to your control. They're reacting to your trust. And trust pulls more weight than control ever can. That's the heart of this paradox. People help more when they feel free to walk away. You let go of the need to control, and in doing so, you actually gain influence. Because influence doesn't come from power, it comes from choice. And the more people feel they have a choice, the more likely they are to choose you. This is backed by research too. Studies have shown that adding, "but you are free to decide" to a request significantly increases compliance, even when the request is the same. It works across cultures, across topics, across personalities, because it taps into something universal, the need to feel like our actions are ours. Not forced, not manipulated, chosen. That's the deepest layer of this paradox. People won't always remember what you asked, but they will remember how your request felt. If it felt like a trap, they'll run. If it felt like freedom, they'll lean in. And they'll say yes, not because you were clever, but because you gave them the one thing everyone wants, even when they don't say it out loud, the freedom to choose. So next time you ask for something, add those words, gently, calmly, clearly. But of course, you're totally free to decide. Then stop. Let them breathe, and let that little phrase do what pressure never could. That's the paradox. When you let go of control, people give you more of it, willingly. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how showing a little disappointment can make people want to impress you more. It sounds backwards. You'd think people respond best to praise, encouragement, and approval. That if you smile and say, "Great job," they'll try even harder. But often, the opposite works better. When you subtly express that you expected just a bit more, without anger, without blame, something strange happens. They lean in, they try harder, not because you criticized them, but because you believed in them, and they didn't quite rise to it. That's the paradox. A soft, quiet hint of disappointment can make someone care more than a loud dose of praise. It's not about guilt, it's about standards. When someone feels like they didn't fully meet your expectations, and you're not mad about it, you're just not thrilled, they begin to feel the gap. The difference between what they did and what they could have done. And that small gap pulls them forward, not with pressure, with pride. Because people don't just want to be accepted, they want to be impressive. They want to feel capable. And when someone they respect shows gentle, controlled disappointment, it doesn't destroy confidence, it activates it. That's the magic. It's not a scolding, it's not an insult, it's more like, "I know you've got more in you." And that knowing creates pressure, not the bad kind, but the kind that inspires. This works especially well with people who already respect you, people who want to be seen as capable in your eyes, because they already care about what you think. So when your tone shifts slightly, when your energy drops just a little, it says, "I hoped for more," and that hope makes them want to rise, not to avoid punishment, but to earn your approval back, even if you never say anything direct. A sigh, a pause, a quiet, a look that says, "Oh, I thought you had that." These things speak volumes, without saying anything at all, and because they're so subtle, they don't trigger defense. They trigger reflection. The person starts asking themselves, "Did I do enough? Could I have handled that better?" Now they're coaching themselves, and self-coaching always sticks deeper than outside pressure. That's what makes this paradox so strange. You don't get more from people by cheering louder. You get more by expecting more and letting them feel that expectation without fully explaining it. But the disappointment must be slight. That's the key. Too much, and it turns into shame. Too strong, and they shut down. Too obvious, and it becomes manipulation. But just enough to be felt, not in words, but in your energy, and they rise. Because people want to fix what feels just a little broken. They want to restore balance. And when they sense that they let you down a little, they act fast to make it right, especially when you're calm about it, when you don't complain, when you just move on. That silence is loud, that calm is heavy, and the weight of it pushes them to improve. This also works because it shows belief. If you didn't expect anything from them, you wouldn't be disappointed. So your disappointment proves that you believe they can do better, and people want to live up to that belief. They want to prove you right, even if they feel they've let you down. And here's the twist. Once they do rise to the occasion, and you recognize it, not with over-the-top praise, but with quiet approval, they feel something even stronger than pride. They feel growth, real earned growth, because it wasn't handed to them. They had to stretch to get it. And now your opinion of them feels earned, not given. That's the paradox again. A bit of disappointment makes your praise more powerful because now it has contrast. They felt the low, so when they feel the high, it lands deeper. It's the space between the two that makes it real. Even in leadership, this works. You say, "I thought we were going to hit that target." Then stop. Don't scold. Don't blame. Let the silence carry the message. The team will feel it. And if they care, they'll respond. Not to fix your mood, but to redeem their own performance. Because we want to meet expectations that are rooted in respect. That's what makes this so different from manipulation. You're not punishing. You're not pretending. You're being honest, but in a controlled, measured way. You're showing that you see more in them, that they're not in trouble, but they're not done yet either. And that tension drives effort. Even in close relationships, this applies. If someone falls short and you don't yell, but you don't smile either, they feel the shift. And if they care about you, they come closer. They ask. They reflect. They step up. Because quiet disappointment can be louder than words, but only when it comes from a place of belief. So the next time someone doesn't quite meet the mark, don't rush to fix it. Don't sugarcoat it. Let the moment breathe. Let your silence speak. Show them what you expected, not through frustration, but through stillness. And if they care, they'll hear it, they'll feel it, and they'll move toward it. That's the paradox. The less you say, the more they want to do, all because they felt they could have done better, and they know you know it too. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how people don't really remember what happened. They remember how it felt at its peak and how it ended. This is called the peak-end rule. It's simple, strange, and surprisingly true. Whether it's a conversation, a vacation, a meeting, a show, or even a painful experience, people won't recall every detail. They won't remember the full timeline. What they'll remember is the strongest emotional point, the peak, and how it all ended. That's the paradox. The middle can be forgettable, even boring, even awful. But if the high moment is strong and the ending feels good, the entire experience gets judged more positively. You can have a long, average day with one amazing moment, followed by a peaceful ending, and you'll call it a great day. You can have a stressful event, but if there's one huge laugh in the middle and it finishes on a calm note, your brain stores it as a good memory. You can sit through a 2-hour movie that drags in the middle, but if the climax hits hard and the ending leaves you smiling, you walk out satisfied. That's the rule. People remember the peak and the end, and those two moments shape the story we tell ourselves afterward. Now here's where the paradox sharpens. The rest of the experience could have been mediocre or even uncomfortable, but it fades. The brain trims the memory. It keeps the emotional highlight and the final emotion. Everything else gets blurry, which means you don't need to make every second great. You just need to make one part amazing and finish strong. It also means that if the peak is weak and the ending is flat, even if the rest was smooth, the memory gets filed under meh. That's the strange twist. A good thing without a powerful moment or a great ending doesn't get remembered as good. It just gets forgotten. This applies to everything: a speech, a performance, a date, a customer experience, a project. People remember what spiked their emotions and what lingered when it ended. That's why some people stay in our memory, not because they were perfect, but because they gave us a powerful moment and left us smiling when it was over. That's why we remember a teacher who gave us a deep insight or a parent who always ended hard days with comfort. The peak gave us impact, the end gave us closure, and that combination built the memory. Even pain follows this rule. Studies show that people who go through painful procedures remember them as less painful when the ending is gentler, even if the total pain was longer, because the final part reshapes the whole memory. That's the paradox again. A longer, painful event that ends better gets judged as less painful than a shorter one with a rough ending. So if you're creating an experience of any kind, focus on two things. Create one emotional high point and end on a positive note. That's it. You don't have to impress from start to finish. You just have to hit the heart once and leave a good taste at the end. The middle doesn't matter as much as we think. It's the emotional spike and the emotional exit that stick. That's what your audience, your friend, your customer, your partner will carry forward. Not the timeline, not the data, just the feeling. This is why musicians end concerts with their biggest hit, why speakers close with their strongest story, why great hosts save dessert for last, because people take their final feeling and turn it into a summary of the whole thing. That's the paradox. The ending becomes the headline. Even if everything leading up to it was average, if the finish feels good, the whole thing becomes great in the mind. And if the ending feels flat or frustrating, it ruins everything, even if most of it went well. You can give someone a gift and they'll enjoy it. But if you rush the goodbye or leave them in confusion, they'll remember that weird ending more than the gift. But reverse it. End with warmth, clarity, a final thoughtful word, and the whole moment gets upgraded in their mind. The same applies in relationships. A conversation can have awkward pauses and small misunderstandings, but if you end it with sincerity, care, and even just a smile, the memory becomes gentle. If you say goodbye with tension, even a beautiful moment can feel sour in hindsight. This isn't manipulation, it's awareness. It's knowing that emotional design shapes memory. You're not faking it. You're choosing to leave people with something they want to carry forward. That's the power of ending well. That's the impact of one strong emotional beat. And it works both ways. If you want to remember your own day as good, create your own peak. Find your own closing ritual. Even if the day was full of stress, take 10 minutes to end it peacefully. Your brain will wrap the whole thing in that memory. You'll go to bed feeling like it wasn't so bad, because your final emotion becomes your summary. So if you lead a meeting, close with clarity and encouragement. If you host a dinner, end with laughter or gratitude. If you run a class, save a moment of insight or lightness for the last minute. You're not trying to fake perfection. You're anchoring the experience with meaning. People won't remember the full sequence. They'll remember the emotional signature, and the signature is written at the peak and at the end. That's the paradox. The middle fades. The end defines. The highest point carries the weight. And what people feel last often becomes what they believe first. So finish strong. And leave them with the memory you want them to keep. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how saying less of your own thoughts and simply repeating theirs makes people trust you more. It sounds too easy to matter. Someone speaks, you say their words back in your own way, and suddenly they feel understood. Not because you solved their problem, not because you gave advice, just because you showed them their words had weight. And here's the paradox. When you stop trying to be interesting and start reflecting what they already said, they start trusting you deeply. This is the power of mirroring in conversation, not mimicking their voice, not copying their tone, but gently repeating what they just told you using slightly different words. So, you're saying it's been really overwhelming lately. Sounds like you feel like no one's listening. It seems like you're not sure what to do next. These kinds of responses feel simple, but they do something powerful. They make the other person feel seen. And being seen is what people want most. The paradox here is that the moment you stop trying to impress someone with your own ideas and instead reflect theirs, they feel connected to you. They lean in. They relax. Because the number one question everyone has when they speak is, did you actually hear me? And when you reflect their thoughts back without judgment, you're answering with action. You're saying, yes, I heard every word. This creates instant trust, not because you agreed, not because you fixed anything, but because you proved you were listening. And most people don't get that kind of listening. They get interruptions. They get advice they didn't ask for. They get rushed responses or unrelated stories. But when someone simply takes their words, holds them up, and gently echoes them back, they feel not just heard, but understood. And understanding builds faster than approval. That's the strange twist. People bond more with those who understand them than with those who try to fix them. Repeating someone's words, even loosely, tells them, your words mattered. They stayed with me. And that's what people are searching for. Not perfect answers, not brilliance, just proof that their voice landed somewhere. This works in any relationship. Work, friendship, family. You're in a meeting, and someone says, I'm worried we're falling behind. Instead of jumping in with solutions, you say, so you feel like we're losing momentum. Now you've taken their concern seriously. You didn't change it. You didn't downplay it. You held it up and said, this matters. And because you gave their words space, they trust you more. That's the paradox. The more you repeat their language, the more they trust your presence. You're not using fancy words. You're not showing off. You're reflecting. And reflection builds a mirror in the conversation, a mirror where they see themselves more clearly, and they see you as someone safe. Even in disagreement, this works. Someone says, I just think your idea won't work. Instead of defending, say, so you feel like it's too risky, or maybe not realistic right now? That slows everything down. It removes heat. It shows you're listening even when you disagree, and that kind of listening builds bridges. Because people don't calm down when you tell them to calm down. They calm down when they feel heard. And people don't trust you more when you talk louder. They trust you more when you reflect better. This is especially powerful in emotionally charged conversations. When someone is upset, they don't want your opinion first. They want to know you get it. You say, that sounds like it really frustrated you. Or, it seems like that made you feel invisible. That small line makes a huge difference, because now they don't have to keep repeating themselves. Now they don't feel alone in their feeling. They feel matched, and that match brings comfort. You're not taking over the conversation. You're making space inside it. You're not speaking for them. You're speaking with them. And that shared space builds connection faster than cleverness ever could. Even in sales, this works. A customer says, I'm just not sure this is worth the price. Instead of arguing, say, so what I'm hearing is that you want to make sure this is a solid investment. Now they feel heard. You haven't agreed. You haven't disagreed. You've simply acknowledged. And acknowledgement turns walls into windows. That's the paradox again. You win people over not by changing their mind, but by showing them you understand their mind. And once they feel understood, they're far more open to what you say next. But the magic only works when it's honest. You can't fake it. You can't just throw their words back like a trick. You have to be present. You have to actually listen. And if you do, the reflection will feel natural. Because it is natural. The mind loves hearing its own thoughts shaped by someone else. It's comforting. It's clarifying. It helps people hear themselves better. And the person who helps them hear themselves better becomes unforgettable. So the next time you want to connect with someone, don't start with your ideas. Start with theirs. Listen closely. Then reflect. Say it back in your own words. Make space for their feelings. Let them feel echoed, not argued, not fixed, just seen. Because that's what opens people up. That's what makes them trust you. That's the paradox. When you reflect their words, they remember you, not because you were brilliant, but because you made them feel understood. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how something so small, so quiet, and so fast, a simple touch, can make someone feel more connected to you without either of you realizing why. It's called the subtle touch, a gentle tap on the arm, a brief hand on the shoulder, not long, not intense, not repeated, just enough to be noticed, but not enough to be focused on. That little moment, used with care and respect, can build warmth faster than words. And here's the paradox. The less you draw attention to it, the more power it has. This kind of touch doesn't need explanation. It doesn't interrupt the flow of conversation. It rides inside it, like a hidden message. It says, "You're safe here. We're on the same side. I see you." It creates a micro-connection that feels natural, even if it's not conscious. And that's the strange part. Most people won't even remember being touched, but they'll remember that the moment felt good, that it felt human. That's the secret. A well-timed touch doesn't speak to the mind. It speaks to the body, and the body responds first. Touch is one of the oldest forms of communication. It existed long before language, before stories, before logic. And even now, with all the tools we use to connect, nothing replaces the feeling of a human hand saying, "I'm here." That message goes deeper than a compliment. It hits below the surface, but it only works when it's subtle, light, brief, respectful. The moment it feels forced, the spell breaks. But when it's natural, when it matches the emotion, the rhythm, the connection, it adds a layer of closeness that no words can reach. You're not trying to make a statement. You're trying to signal trust. And here's the twist. The smaller the touch, the bigger the impact. A quick tap during a laugh, a light touch on the arm during agreement, a warm hand on the shoulder during comfort. These moments carry a quiet power because they feel like connection without effort. That's why this works so well. The person doesn't think, they touched me, now I like them more. They just feel slightly safer, slightly warmer, slightly closer. They associate you with that feeling, and they don't even know why. That's what makes this paradox so strange. The most forgettable part of the conversation, the tiny moment no one talks about, is often what shapes how people feel about the whole interaction. It's emotional anchoring without a script. Even in professional settings, when used appropriately, this can shift the energy in the room. A quick handshake with both hands, a brief touch on the forearm when saying thank you. These aren't tricks, they're reminders. They tell the nervous system, this person is kind, this moment is real. And in personal relationships, the impact is even stronger. Touch builds trust faster than talk. When someone is upset, you can say all the right words, but a hand on the shoulder during a tough pause might say more. When someone is celebrating, you can cheer all you want, but a quick squeeze of the arm can deepen the joy. It's strange how something so small can be so loud emotionally. That's the paradox again. The body picks up messages the mind doesn't question. A brief touch doesn't ask for attention, but it holds it. It doesn't explain, it just communicates. The reason it works so well is because it adds presence. It proves you're there, not just physically, but emotionally. And people feel the difference. They may forget what you said. They may forget what the conversation was about, but they'll remember how you made them feel, and that feeling was shaped, in part, by a 2-second gesture. Even science backs this up. Studies show that a light touch increases the chance of agreement. It increases warmth. It increases likability. But only when it's brief, natural, and respectful. Anything more becomes distraction. Anything less gets lost. You're not trying to dominate. You're not trying to impress. You're offering reassurance in the most human way possible through quiet contact. And the most fascinating part? The power of the touch doesn't come from how you feel. It comes from how they feel. It's not about your confidence. It's about their comfort. That's the paradox inside the paradox. You're the one initiating the touch, but they're the one who receives the benefit. And yet, you become more likable. You become more trusted, because their body links that moment of reassurance back to you. So the next time you're talking with someone, don't reach out to impress. Reach out to connect. Let your touch be honest. Let it be short. Let it match the energy of the moment. Say less. Touch light. And let that 1-second gesture carry the message your voice can't say. Because that's the paradox. In a world full of words, the smallest, quietest physical moment can create the strongest emotional memory. The echo technique. Want to make someone feel understood instantly? Repeat the last 2 or 3 words they just said, softly, curiously, like a question. It sounds stupid, too simple, but try it. Them. I've been overwhelmed lately. You. Overwhelmed lately? Suddenly they open up more. Yeah, with work mostly. Deadlines piling up. You. Deadlines piling up? Now they start venting, unraveling, exposing things you didn't even ask about. You're not offering advice. You're not probing. You're just echoing, and it makes people feel like you get them on a deep level. Here's the scary part. It bypasses their emotional guardrails, because when someone hears their own words mirrored back, their brain processes it as validation. They drop defenses. They trust faster. Used ethically, it builds rapid connection. Used manipulatively, it can steer someone's emotional state without them realizing why. The trick? Don't overuse it. Echo every 4th or 5th response. Vary your tone slightly. Keep your eyes soft. People will think you're a brilliant conversationalist when you're just reflecting their own script back at them. And once someone feels heard, they start to crave your presence. Not because you said something profound, but because you listened in a way their own mind couldn't resist. The silence gap. Most people can't handle silence. In a conversation, silence feels awkward, tense, unnatural, and because of that, silence is one of the most powerful tools you can use. Here's the trick. Ask a question, then say nothing. Just wait. They'll squirm, fidget, and then they'll fill the silence with the truth. Because in those moments of quiet, people start to panic and spill more than they intend to. Want someone to admit something? Let the silence grow. Want someone to reveal how they really feel? Ask, then wait. Just a few more seconds than is comfortable. In negotiations, it's brutal. You make your offer. You pause, and suddenly the other person starts to negotiate against themselves. They'll lower their price, raise their terms, make concessions just to fill the void you left. The human brain seeks resolution. When there's an open space, the instinct is to close it. But if you can sit with silence, you're in control. Try it. Most people last 3 seconds. You wait 5, 7, 10. The longer you hold it, the more power you gain. Not by force, not by argument, but by letting their own discomfort do the work for you. It's persuasion without pressure, control without effort, influence born from stillness. The false choice trap. You want someone to choose option A, but you can't just tell them. It'll sound pushy. So instead, you create a trap. Give them a choice where every path leads where you want. Example, instead of saying, "Can I book you for Tuesday?" say, "Would you prefer Tuesday or Thursday?" Suddenly, it's not a question of if, It's a question of when. The illusion of choice makes people feel autonomous, when in reality, you narrowed their options to only outcomes that benefit you. This is used everywhere. Parenting. Do you want to brush your teeth now or after your story? Management. Should we finalize the plan today or first thing tomorrow? Sales. Would you like the regular package or the premium? The genius lies in what's missing. No. That's not even on the table. Now here's where it gets eerie. The more intelligent or assertive someone is, the better this works, because they don't want to feel controlled. The false choice lets them protect their ego while doing exactly what you intended. But be careful. Overuse it, and people catch on. They may feel manipulated, and once trust is broken, it's hard to repair. Used sparingly, though, it's not just effective. It's surgical, a tool to guide behavior while making others believe the idea was theirs all along. The confession mirror. There's a little-known truth about people. If you confess something mildly vulnerable or personal, they feel compelled to match your level of openness. This trick is subtle, and it works too well. Say something like, "I always get nervous in big crowds, even if I pretend not to." Watch what happens. The person next to you starts reflecting. "Yeah, I actually hate social events too. I get exhausted after 10 minutes. You just unlocked their walls without touching them. Why? Because humans are wired to maintain social equilibrium. When you reveal something emotionally honest, it creates a psychological imbalance. The other person subconsciously feels like they need to equalize the moment by giving something back. Even stronger, combine this with lowered tone, soft eye contact, and no expectations. The less pressure you put on them, the more they lean in. Here's where it gets chilling. This can lead people to confess things they never intended to say. Fears, desires, guilt, resentment. You've triggered a feedback loop of intimacy. Politicians, interrogators, and con artists use this. So do empaths and therapists. It's a blade that cuts both ways. Used for connection, it's beautiful. Used for manipulation, it's terrifying. And the worst part, once someone mirrors your confession, they feel closer to you than you do to them, because the mirror didn't just reflect, it absorbed. User. Welcome to the first paradox. Let's start with a simple yet mind-bending question. How can saying say? This is a paradox that lives in silence, a trick that feels too empty to work, and yet it can flip a conversation upside down. Think about it. You ask someone a tough question. Why did you lie about that? Or, what are you not telling me? And then you stop. You just, no words, no rescue, no softening the blow, no filling the space, just silence, nothing, everything. The power pause. Look. And then something strange happens. That silence, it starts to speak loudly, not to you, but to them. Their mind begins spinning. Why isn't he saying anything? What is she thinking right now? Do I need to explain more? And the brain hates that uncertainty. It panics. The silence stretches, becomes awkward, uncomfortable, unbearable. And suddenly, they talk, they explain, they confess, they overshare. You didn't even move. You didn't raise your voice. You just paused. That's the paradox. You controlled everything by doing nothing. It doesn't make sense. We're taught to be assertive, to push our point, to fill the silence with logic and argument and fire. But this is the opposite. It's restraint. And restraint doesn't feel powerful until you use it. Here's why this paradox works so deeply. Silence doesn't mean nothing. It means waiting. And waiting makes people wonder. People fill in blanks. They add meaning. They assume judgment, disapproval, curiosity, threat. All you did was pause, and they experienced a storm. Now here's the real twist. The less you say, the more they hear. That's the inversion. We believe that to be heard, we must speak more, but in truth, the human brain hates ambiguity. It craves resolution. So if you give someone a sharp question and follow it with silence, their mind won't rest until the silence is resolved. That's when the truth slips out. It's like holding up a mirror, not a physical one, but a mental one. The pause reflects their thoughts right back at them, and in that reflection, the truth gets louder. They start answering questions you didn't even ask. Their mind says, I need to break this silence. I need to explain myself. I need to protect myself. And that's when they open the door. The power pause is not a trick. It's a pressure point. It's the space after the strike that matters. The question stings. The pause amplifies it. Just like a drum beat, you don't just hear the hit, you hear the echo. Now let's go deeper. Why does this silence hold power? Because in social settings, silence is rare. We're addicted to noise. We fill every gap with something. Words, jokes, explanations, defenses. So when someone dares to go quiet, the rules change. It signals control, confidence, calm. And nothing is more intimidating than someone who is completely calm in a moment of tension. It's like playing poker. The guy who never blinks, never fidgets, just stares at you silently after a bold move. That's the guy you start fearing, because you don't know what he's thinking. That's what the power pause does. It creates mystery, and mystery always leads to movement. You don't even have to force anything. They'll do it to themselves. But here's the wild part. People often think that speaking gives them control, but the real control lies in what you withhold. Silence becomes leverage. The pause becomes a test. Will they stay calm? Will they rush to defend? Will they spill something they didn't mean to say? You find out the truth not by pressing harder, but by pulling back. It's like fishing. You don't yank the line immediately. You wait. You feel. You let the tension build. The pause is that tension, and tension always seeks release. That release, their words. Still, don't get this wrong. Silence isn't passive. It's active. It's intentional. It's surgical. You don't go quiet because you have nothing to say. You go quiet because they have something to say, and you're giving them space to reveal it. This is why the power pause is so paradoxical. It's loud in its quietness. It's aggressive in its stillness. It's dominant in its subtlety. The world teaches you to respond fast, speak often, and take control by force. The power pause flips that entirely. You take control by holding back. You weaponize the stillness, and the silence becomes a force they can't ignore. It's also disarming. When someone expects a fight and gets stillness, their guard drops, their rhythm breaks. And in that break, truth slips out. People are less filtered when they're trying to fix a moment that feels wrong, and an awkward silence feels very wrong. So they scramble, and in the scramble, they expose. Now imagine using this in your everyday life. In a negotiation, pause after they give you a number. Just look at them. Wait, don't flinch. In a relationship, pause after you ask, is that really how you feel? In an argument, pause after you say, that's not what I heard. You're not trying to win with volume. You're letting them fill in the gaps, and they will. Because silence hurts. It itches, it stretches, and in that stretched moment, the mask slips. You're not being manipulative. You're being strategic. You're making space for the truth to surface. You're letting discomfort do the work, and that's the heart of the paradox. In a world that runs from awkward silence, you walk straight into it and let them run from it instead. So next time you want the truth, don't chase it. Just create the gap, ask your question, make your bold statement, and then say nothing. Welcome to the next paradox. This one is about how getting someone to help you makes them like you more. It doesn't make sense at first. We assume that if we want people to like us, we should help them. We should give, support, offer, assist. That's what friendship is, right? But this flips the idea on its head. It says, don't give, ask, don't serve, receive. Because when someone does something small for you, something strange happens in their mind. They start liking you more, not because of what you gave them, but because of what they gave you. That's the Benjamin Franklin effect, and it's a complete reversal of logic. Franklin himself noticed it first. He had a rival in politics, someone who didn't like him. So instead of trying to win him over with kindness or favors, Franklin did something bold. He asked the man if he could borrow a rare book, just a small ask. The man agreed. Franklin thanked him and returned it later. But after that moment, their relationship changed. The man warmed up to him. He even became a friend, not because Franklin gave something, but because he asked for something. The paradox lives here. Doing a favor makes us like the receiver. Our brain doesn't enjoy contradictions. So if we help someone and we didn't have to, our mind tries to make sense of it. Why did I do that? I must like this person. Otherwise, why would I help them? The help justifies the feeling, even if the feeling wasn't there before. We don't help people because we like them. We like people because we help them. That's the reversal, and the mind does this quietly. You ask for a small favor, a pencil, a bit of advice, a simple opinion. They say yes, and that yes begins to pull on something deeper. They begin to tell themselves a story. I helped them, so I must value them. They must be worth my time. And just like that, rapport is born, not from giving, but from receiving. It's not manipulation. It's human wiring. The mind wants to stay consistent. So once we act kindly, we adjust our beliefs to match our behavior. If I helped you, then I must feel something positive toward you. Otherwise, my action wouldn't make sense. That's what makes this paradox powerful. It's not based on charm, wealth, or clever words. It's based on the small, simple act of asking. And when you ask, you create space for the other person to step into that story. But notice, it only works if the favor is small. If you ask for too much, it feels like a transaction. It flips the script back to logic. I did this because I had to. But a small favor? That flies under the radar. It sneaks past defenses. It feels unimportant until it isn't. Because now, they've invested something. A moment, a choice, a bit of themselves. And once someone invests in you, they subconsciously want a return. But not a return from you. A return from within. That return is emotional. It's identity-based. I am someone who helps good people. So if I helped you, you must be a good person. See the twist? You're not proving your worth to them. They're deciding your worth because they helped you. That's why the Benjamin Franklin effect is so paradoxical. You gain more by taking a little than by giving a lot. And that's hard for people to accept. We want to impress. We want to be generous. We want to earn affection. But this effect says, pause. Stop trying to give. Try asking. Just enough to let someone feel like they've done something meaningful for you. And the more they do, the more they justify liking you. It's a cycle, a self-reinforcing loop. They help, they help again, they like more. And none of it feels forced because their own actions convince them. This turns the usual social playbook upside down. Think of how most people try to build connection. They offer, they serve, they try to win affection through sacrifice. But that can feel imbalanced. It can even make the other person feel guilty or resistant, because being helped often creates a sense of debt. But when they help you, the feeling flips. Now they feel agency. They made a choice. They see you as someone worth choosing. And that feeling grows, not because of what you did, but because of what you allowed them to do. This is why great leaders and connectors use this without even realizing it. They ask for opinions. They ask for insights.